and teaching extensively in her fields. Ma'am, thank you for joining us. We welcome you, ma'am. She will discuss on technology facilitated sexual violence in Asia. We look forward for ma'am's valuable perspectives. Next, we have with us Professor Shabari Bhattacharya, ma'am. Ma'am is from Bangalore University Physics Department. She holds a PhD from Tata Institution of Fundamental Research. Her expertise spans optical tweezers, magnetic materials, biophysics, and nanoparticle physics. Her research published in peer-reviewed journals and focuses on multidisciplinary physics, particularly in interaction of physics with the biochemical systems. She bridges physics and biology through her work. Thank you for joining us, ma'am. We welcome you. Ma'am will share her insights on challenges of pursuing a career in science for a woman in India. We look forward for ma'am's valuable perspectives. And then we have with us, next with us virtually, we'll be having Professor Bulabhadra ma'am. Ma'am is an emeritus at Sister Nivedita University. Ma'am is a distinguished sociologist specializing in interdisciplinary studies and childhood research. With the PhD from MC Master University, she has significantly contributed to academic discourse on children's rights and the impact of global trends. Her publications and research explore the effect of colonial knowledge on contemporary sociology. She has also edited interdisciplinary works and engaged in discussion on social science research. We warmly welcome you, ma'am. It is a pleasure to have you with us. She'll share her insights on gendering of new technology, ignotorian of globalization. We look forward for ma'am's valuable perspectives. Now over to you, ma'am.
Hello, thank you, Pranati. A very good afternoon. Is it possible for those lights to go down a bit? Or is that going to interfere with the projection? Those very bright lights. All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I was just telling Sudeshna that a cup of tea after lunch was something that I would always insist on when we were organizing so that everybody can be awake. But I'm sure the session will keep you awake. And thank you, Sudeshna, very, very much for one, organizing this conference and also for, inviting me here. Of course, I think it was my mistake. I was slightly confused. I thought, I thought that I was going to present, then I realized that I'm going to chair, so I'm lost. So now I will just basically perform the role of the chair and maybe refer a little bit to what I had planned also in the form of a presentation. I'd like to start by flagging off a set of themes which I think are important ways of entering this conference. As a sociologist, I feel that for a very long time we now have been discussing and deliberating over what to do with digital sociology. Most universities are still not teaching the discipline. Yeah, digital sociology as a discipline is not yet sort of matured in the country. And so therefore, theoretically, methodologically, while there is work coming out, across, I don't know exactly the numbers, but there are lots of PhDs now looking at the digital space. I think that is something that needs considerable strengthening. And I hope that an outcome of something like this kind of a conference will be that we start seriously about thinking of designing courses in digital sociology, digital humanities, maybe, And so that's the first thing. As far as also, I think women's studies and feminist activism still has a very, it's a very tension-ridden relationship with the digital. And I think that is something we need to look more deeply into and theorize much more. So as a sociologist, I would say this entire debate around the digital and the virtual needs to be contextualized within larger, more broader theories of network society, which have put forward the proposition that the world is, Anthony Giddens being the leading figure in this kind of thinking, is that there is post-globalization. I mean, the world has always seen space-time compression. But in the era of globalization, what is happening, what kind of space time compression is happening, what are the tools for doing this? Is it combined with the weakening of the nation states? Is it combined with the growth of global capitalism? These are things, forces that contribute. So space-time compression, the world becoming closer, is not as simple as some theorists in management theory, for instance, would like to imagine. Also, we know for a fact that globalization, increased network societies have led to a deepening of inequalities. The world is not becoming flat, as again some people would like to think. It is becoming more and more differentiated and more heterogeneous. Within this context, I would say that the contribution of the field of something like digital sociology is to ponder over a couple of important things. One is, of course, the question of access, which we are all talking about, the digital divide, and states are investing a lot in making digital technologies more accessible in order to sort of, and there is no doubt that it sort of democratizes, like all technological innovations at some point do perform the function of democratizing and leveling of social inequalities. But we also know that simultaneously technology is Janus, it's a two-faced thing, it's a double-edged knife. It will also reproduce social structures. So the contribution of digital sociology is, of course, also to question this idea of what constitutes the real. What is reality? Is virtual reality to be counted as real or not? What is the experience of people in virtual zones? And to look carefully at the two twin principles that happen here is one is augmenting and strengthening of autonomy and agency of several actors, including those at the margins, but also reproduction of social structures. In this sense, I would say that we examine some of these questions here. We are talking about digital. Before we have even come to terms with the digital, we are now in the world of artificial intelligence, and I think a lot of new things and new theories and new ways of looking will have to happen. So other than these two, I would say that also in India, as we've been hearing also, that the women's studies and women's movements have actually very interestingly occupied this space. It is being used. So, for example, an ideal forum like Agents of Ishq, which has completely revolutionized the digital space and the question of desire and female sexuality, and to express agency. On the other hand, what you see is that women's groups, we heard in the morning about the Pink Chandi campaign, which was a signaling moment of the use of digital, or the coming of digital activism within the women's movement. I think okay, so I think this space that women activists and are occupying, to my mind, the Losha moment that happened almost about 10, 12 years after the Pink Chaddi campaign, something like that. The Losha movement was specific and significant to India because the Me Too movement everywhere over the world was a movement that took over the media. In India, we were unique in flagging of some of the concerns of sexual harassment within the academia. And for me personally, it was a very informative moment because I felt, and this is what I was talking about earlier, that the tensions in the women's movement erupted quite significantly. So within hours of Losha, Raya Sarkar putting out the list, a group of very senior feminists who had worked, quote unquote, at the grassroots of higher education institutes and worked towards actually making very, very significant contributions to the building of due process in how sexual harassment should be addressed, wrote out a very, very harsh response to Losha, condemning it for actually being extremely irresponsible in their activism and using politics of naming and shaming. For some of a moment to notice the question of intersectionality, Raya Sarkar identifies as Dalit. We know that legal processes or due processes within higher education institutions do not work as well for Dalit students as we would like them. So Losha for the moment was to also recognize that what we think we are setting as due process actually doesn't work for many, many people from marginal groups. It sort of, and there was a fear that you could feel, an intergenerational tension that you could feel, where the earlier generation of feminists actually thought that that the kind of activism that is coming out is not morally right. And the younger generation felt that they were losing their heroes because they were not being supported. Anyway, so some of us wrote about this around that time to bring in the idea of intersectionality and squarely, and intersectionality as it was being expressed in the digital. I also argued at that time, I remember saying that the digital was definitely an axis for this tension, because I think that here is a question of the digital immigrant and the digital native, a terminology that has been used a lot in the digital humanities by people like Mark Prensky, where Raya Sarkar and her generation are natives, perhaps, of the digital world. And some of us in the older generation are immigrating. So there is a different way in which we relate to the digital space. And I think that was also a part of that moment of tension. So while Pink Chaddi got criticized for being elite, Losha got criticized for being irresponsible in that sense, yeah. So I just wanted to flag off some of these issues. But today's session, as I can see, is interesting because it brings in very, very important shifts in contemporary feminist theory, in our movements also, where the question is no more about just women. It's a question about gender non-conforming people. It's a question about building allyship and solidarity with queer movements. It's also time, and I feel, for theorizing and understanding and bringing in our fold certain critical masculinity studies, which we need to also start a conversation with. I just referred, for example, to the new Netflix series, I don't know how many of you have seen it, called Adolescence. I can see smiles there at the young. Yeah. So it's an extremely significant, and surprisingly, it is really picked up, and it's a rage in India for some reason, which we will analyze. So it is a question about what the digital world, or what the virtual world is doing to masculinity and young masculinity and the production of toxic masculinity, and how the social media becomes a dominant discourse. So these are a few just very rambling sort of ideas that I wanted to frame today's conversation in. We have Bula with us. We start with Bula. Bula Bhadra, who's going to speak on gendering of new technology, ignored terrain of globalization. I think we're following the order of Bula, then Sharbari, and then Michelle. Yeah. We can't hear you, Professor Bhadra.
You can hear me, all right, then it's fine. You can write in the chat box regarding questions. Hello.
Yes, you can start, Bula.
Hello. Okay. If you cannot hear me, please tell me, then I'll put the volume up again because I cannot hear anything from your side actually. Okay. I got the note, so I'm starting. Okay, fine, thank you. The name of the presentation is Gendering of New Technology, neglected terrain of globalization and dangers of living in a connected world. I can share this one, of course, but you won't need that. I mean, I can just write it in the chat box because once I introduce PPT, it is going to take a long time. It is 2:40 in my watch, so hope that is 2:40 also there. Let me say one thing about this presentation, that I have been working since 2002 or so, and that was the time actually, internet was not that available, and internet was actually, even though there is digital divide, how interestingly women and women's body parts, including little girls' body parts, are actually shown, bought and sell on the internet market. So I started journey from there. There are 3 articles which I wrote on this. One was Asiatic Society Kolkata published it. The second one, the neglect of gendering issue in the globalization literature. It was published by Rawat. I think essays in honor of forgot. Essays in honor of, I think, JNU professor we all had. So that was one. And the third one is published in Socialist Gazette, Indian Socialist Gazetteer, the official journal of the volume ISSA. That is Dangers of Living in a Connected World and Indian Scenario. Obviously, I will be only able to tell you about a little bit of what it is and how actually, it is a problem zone in a sense that you have no control of it, none of it. Let me start with this point that what is this? I mean, situating the theme, let me say. I'm situating the theme in a way that you will see why I did this work. I mean, that's the rationale of it. In 2016, published in Fordham Intellectual Property Media and Law Journal, a profound observation about the nature of cyberspace. They say that virtual sphere is theoretically blind to gender, age, race, disabilities, and country of origin. Any user can create content without initiation on the number of websites, blogs, and Facebook accounts. Even the government cannot completely control or resist the content. So, this was told in 2016 by two social scientists and a lawyer, Ravid and Mittelman. In 2005, a book which has made almost a century, is one of the important books, Thomas Friedman, in his World is Flat, A Brief History of the 21st Century, made a statement of similar significance. He wrote, "There has been never a time in history when human imagination wasn't important. But writing this book tells me that it has never been more important than now, because in a flat world, so many of the tools of collaboration are becoming commodities available to everyone. There is one thing through that has not and can never be commoditized, and that is imagination. What content we dream of creating." So for this, digital globalization defined largely from flows of data and information in a new form of things, bringing about relevant changes. Businesses have done across borders, economic benefits, broader participation, etc., etc. So this was basically the theme of people. And with pioneering developments in biotechnologies and digitalization, assurance began to loom large that the so-called umbilical connection between technology and male prerogative has been finally disengaged. So apparently new technologies ushered new mantras and the cyber gurus about that the digital futures would be very different than what we have, and obliterating many equalities underlying the word, including gender inequalities. So the promises of information and communication technologies, ICTs in short, gave us a sort of empowering understanding, especially for women and transgender relations, that it will be something else in cyberspace. But at the height of this optimism, we find that that is not so the case. The case is something very serious. Now, this is a departure point where I take up the cyberspace and the content of the cyberspace and the gendering, and also, let's say, commodifying to the highest extent possible. So against this particular challenge or assertion that cyberspace is neutral, my presentation interrogates this disembodied character, neutrality, and gender blindness of cyberspace. It highlights the more profound point of making women's bodies the target for commodification and their body parts subject to a virtual male gaze, thus continually redirecting a newfangled gendering process through cyberspace in the zenith of neoliberal globalization. The purpose is to debunk the myth of gender neutrality, that digital technology is pure and neutral and hence free from any sexual and gendered implication, of course, taking a special reference to India. Now, I start my theoretical departure point with the fact that the umbilical cord between digital globalization and ICTs, is it broken or it is getting stronger? Now, when we see the reconfiguration of the social place, what we call globalization is intimately linked to shifts in patterns of knowledge production, governance, identity, social relations, and the ways that people relate to each other and also with nature. So, along with an increasing interdependence, the space became also the site for penetration and intensification of relations among individuals, societies, or nation states. So it signifies the ascendancy of global capitalist market relations based primarily on ICTs, information and communication technologies. What is ICTs? Very briefly, you all know, but it's just a single one definition: a complex and heterogeneous set of goods, application, and services used to produce, distribute, process, and transform information. Now, globalization has touched every nook and corner of it, and there is a transworld reality appearing from that. Now, this particular transversal simultaneity and instantity takes social relations beyond territorial geography. Here, the difference is qualitative, the change is structural, which means the recent globalization, which we can say second decade of the 21st century, or even starting of the third decade, a little bit somewhere. Recent globalization has been closely connected with certain forms of re-territorialization. So, social space in today's world is both territorial and super territorial. The two qualities always intersect in contemporary relations. Thus, every internet user access cyberspace from a territorial location. Just about every household on Earth today encounters global products. Just about everything, global finance, global communication in some direct or indirect way, etc. No regional, national, provincial, local, or household condition today exists in isolation from global circumstances. This multi-dimensionality brings greater complexity to geography and extends to culture, ecology, economics, politics, health, illness, science, sociology, social psychology, and technology. So there is nothing untouched. And right from the beginning of the urban Calcuttan use of the toothpaste to the night when we go to bed, using of the good night for killing mosquitoes. Everything that is actually global, produced elsewhere and distributed somewhere else. So then, these particular relationships create, of course, digital platforms. And it is best evident in the explosion of both buyers and sellers on the internet. Each new customer on the internet increases the value to sellers, and each new seller on the internet increases its value to buyers. So the internet becomes or created condition for rapid interoperable global communication platform, which together with the TCP/IP standard graphic user interface and personal computers and their clones is capable of transmitting hugely digitized information files globally. So this is one of the basic impact which has made globalization actually something to think about. It would be taking if I show the tables. So I'm seeking actually avoiding them, but just to give one or two examples that 45% of the world's population now use internet. Now means 2024 data. And 94% actually urban area people access that. Out of that, male access is 97%, and 80% is female access. This is the data for 23-24. If I go more, then it will be data orient. I don't want that. Now, this particular transmission of obscene content online started being reported from 2012, according to National Crime Records Bureau of India. As far as police report is concerned, cyber crimes against women are also growing, which includes stalking, online stalking, morphing, and creating sexually explicit Facebook accounts of women and uploading sex videos without their consent. So this is the starting, not really starting, actually midway to see how internet has developed into a hugely profitable market. And people are openly telling that it's better to work with the pornography than to work as, accountant in the internet protocol. So pornography then became about 69% of the revenue giving situation of all internet ones. This is also an earlier data. Now it has changed. So this particular cybercrime, when it's happening, one of the lawyer who specialized in this, Pavan Dugal, Delhi based, he wrote that a sizable number of people now have a phone with a camera, but very few understand or pay any heed for laws. Paradoxically, police also do not deem it grave enough to even register a complaint, and indubitably parents and the police blame the women and the victim. This is 2012-13. So what happens then? Where should she go? Where should she actually go for help? Because both the social atmosphere and the official atmosphere is not that so, friendly. So to begin with, the questions were asked about those who were victimized. And this is the interesting part of the crimes of against women. Always first we get to the victim. Here also we say, why did she get close to a man in the first place? My God, this is virtual reality. Wake up. A lot of it goes unreported because there are issues of social order and shame. Women are rarely to be found in the internal corporate structure of the globalizing economy. Saskia Sassen told us that every new technology that has been invented in the last 2 decades of globalization has been utilized to deliver sexual content. It's capital and labor fused in women's body or body parts, but invariably the profit went to the global capitalist or capitalism. Strangely, though, the massive literature on digitalized globalization suffers from two distinct types of biases or amnesia in whatever way one looks at it. The first one is that process of globalization is represented as gender blind or gender neutral. I mean, this is the first conclusive position from my point of view, that no cyberspace would be degendered, including transgender and male bodies also. Saskia, as I referred, uh, as early as 1998, claimed that mainstream grounds of globalization emphasize technical and abstract economic dynamics and proceed as if they were gender neutral when they are not. This reminds us of a narrative when women's domestic labor was labor of love only, and it was the care work, not worthy of selling. Now we have a big care industry, division between unpaid care and paid care. So this narrative of eviction of women from the corporate world of the globalization tells us that why they are silent. Because if they are not silent, the story will be really something, and that would go against the use of it. So the literature on the impact of ICTs does not take into account the fact that this technology is saturated with masculinist rhetoric and very often sexist. On the one hand, accepting the fact that internet is a contested terrain, denial of harm and silence exist. On the other, the commodification of body parts of women and the new technology's impeccable ability for facilitating the sexual exploitation of women and children is ubiquitous. So, how many times have we heard the swell claim that there is no race and no gender online, and the internet is a disembodied communication from where the bodily performity has vanished? Online, you can be anything or anyone. Jody Bryan then reminded us that every time you enter the net, you will get a question like R, U, M, or F. R, ARER, short form R, then U, RU, short form U, M, male, or a female. So this one is the first question, which is still, asked. It's not gone away. Now, you can play with it, but it's still asked. So significantly, no such abbreviations are in widespread use for questions and concerning age, height, weight, socioeconomic status, etc. So gender is one characteristic of our embodied lives that is a central feature in interaction throughout the internet. For example, one cannot register in Yahoo Messenger without starting gender and occupation. So obviously, the whole cyberspace is now available, open, for a highest type of commodification and marketization and process of digitalization entered into the virtual reality through systems, through chat rooms, computer games, you name it, any kind of computerized thing. I'm not anti-technology. I just don't want technology to be used or abused this way, because internet has given us a lot. Like that, I'm able to present my views to you all. Actually the contribution of internet. But the problem is the structure of cyberspace facilitates a wall between persons' real physical limitations with all prejudices and divisions that endangers. So individuals are constrained by these limitations. In cyberspace, the only restriction is an individual's imagination and creativity. Remember, the world is flat, Friedman, 2005. So only your creativity is not yet been out in the market. But you can do it. There's no doubt about it. The structure of cyberspace facilitates a wall between a person's real identity and the virtual one. In actuality, with the rise of the internet, a new sphere was created beyond borders, beyond total governmental control, beyond property limitation, beyond regulation, almost any boundary beyond. There is no chance of any government, any agency to catch, because the person doing it must be could be in Italy or Alaska, and sending someone into Croatia or so. So obviously, in a nutshell, these early debates around the body technology questions were polarized. What happens in the make is that performative space does not directly connect with who we are and how we live. In one of the greatest book of this 20th century is Sherry Turkle's Life on the Screen, where she shows the first one to question this binary between the body and the digital self. I don't know whether Sherry Turkle is taught in any university, but it would be worth it. Working closely with the first users of the online virtual reality worlds called multiple user dungeons, Turkle notes how being online started producing a different way of thinking about who we are.
Bhadra, maybe 1 minute.
Then let me stop, because I started at 2:41. It's now 2 to 3. Obviously, I cannot finish, so I'll leave it here. I will just say there is. I didn't even cover 50% yet. Rape in cyberspace. Sharkle and her assistant Julian DeBell showed that describes a case study that corroborates many of the observations that Turkle presents. If you want me to finish in 5 to 7, then I can. But if you say 1 minute, let me stop here then.
Professor Bhadra, maybe we can.
Please, your voice, please. There is a huge noise coming. You got down. There's a huge noise coming. Yes, go ahead, tell me. I don't know. Anyway, the UN Broadband Commission for Digital Development 2015 report on cyber violence against women and girls suggests cyber violence overwhelmingly targets women and girls, and a particular terminology is used now, VOG. Violence against women and girls and cyber VOG fade into each other. I don't know. Chairperson, madam, should I go on a little bit?
Take up your question.
Because then I knew this and I didn't want to present, that's why. Then let me stop just. I hope the main theme is in. I just want to show this one. Let's see whether I can show this. The 55 are of the NSFW variety, ranking ahead of the likes of Instagram, Hotstar, IRCTC, Quora, Paytm, IMD, etc. And even the government tax filing e-portal has porn sites up to 20% of the list. A single look at their earnings will make anyone want to venture into the adult entertainment business, as it's now called. While the sites rank by traffic in India, Note that their earnings are calculated globally. The government directed internet service providers to block 827 websites that host pornographic content on October 9, 2018. Despite this, Indian government's crackdown on porn websites, global players have found a unique way to dodge the ban and are now back on across the country without any fear. In fact, porn sites
You can just message me. I'm trying to do this only so that we can have some question answers. Yeah? Just type, say thank you, and then we will continue with the discussion afterwards. Thank you, Sharon. Next, I think Sharbari and Michelle, will you both come up so that... You have a PPT? Michelle, you also? Yeah. You want to come first?
It's okay. It's okay with Michelle. Is it okay? You can do it first.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to start off by thanking Dr. Sudeshna Mukherjee for allowing me to be a part of this meeting, this conference. It's a new experience for me, and I am totally delighted to hear so many different views from what I have been normally used to. We tend to essentially have a very biased, I'm sorry I'm using the word, but yes, scientists tend to have a biased view of certain things, and it's nice to broaden that. So I'm very happy to be here, very glad that Sudeshna gave me the opportunity. So what I'm going to talk to you about is basically, as a woman scientist in India, what are the kind of challenges that you essentially face? Now here I must say that with the theme of this conference, which is essentially the influence of digitization on such a sphere, basically science has kind of grown with this digitization. If you kind of look up the history of internet, you will see that the World Wide Web was actually introduced in the Center for Nuclear Studies in Europe, which is known as CERN. And the idea was to enable communication. So science is a global effort, and communication is extremely essential. And all digital means that are available to scientists usually use it. Okay? But nonetheless, there are certain ways in which we can view it. And here, for instance, I have essentially presented some women scientists, because the biggest problem for women scientists in India is usually a lack of role models. And we have over here Anandi Gopal Joshi, the young lady on the leftmost of the screen. And she was actually the first medical doctor. And this was in the year 1880 or so. She unfortunately passed away at the age of 22 in 1887 because of tuberculosis. But this is the first known woman scientist or woman in STEM discipline from India. Now we have other ladies, like for instance the lady on your right, on your left, Ashima Chatterjee. She was the first doctorate from an Indian university. And this was in the year 1944. And we have, of course, more recent women models, women role models, women scientists. We have Dr. Tessie Thomas, who's known as the Missile Woman of India. We have Gagandeep Kang, who is a virologist, a fellow of Royal Society. And currently, she's the director in the enteric diseases section of the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. We have also somebody who's very close after my heart, Professor Rohini Godbole. She's no more. She passed away in October last year. And she was a high-energy theoretical physicist and a real champion for women in science in India. Next slide, please. So the first thing is that what really is science, okay, and why do we need to do it? So science, I would say, is a way, a systematic way of trying to figure out how nature around us works. And this is done by trying to experiment, to observe. And what is the idea behind the whole thing? The idea behind the whole thing is that perhaps then, if you figure out how it works, you can predict. And once you predict, you can exercise some level of control. Next slide, please. So, we can basically divide science into two bits. One is essentially your basic sciences, and this is description, prediction, understanding of natural phenomena based on empirical evidence, which is gathered from observation and experimentation. And all of us know the various branches. There's physics, there's chemistry, there's biology, astronomy, earth sciences. And then, of course, next slide, please. You have the applied sciences. Now, applied sciences is essentially you use what you learn from basic sciences, and then you try to develop interventions via technology or technique to essentially control events or control outcomes. Now, you have various branches of applied sciences. There is engineering, where you design and build structures, machines, devices, processes, which will safely realize improvements to the life of people. And of course, there's medicine, which is essentially the science of healing. So there is no going around the fact that STEM disciplines, which is what I have described to you, actually help in the improvement of human lives. Next slide, please. Now, the point is a breakthrough scientific idea can be born in any well-prepared and curious mind. It doesn't matter who, it doesn't matter where, and it doesn't matter at what age. Sometimes, younger people are more likely to have breakthrough ideas, but nonetheless. Next slide, please. And any such idea could have a potential to revolutionize our world. And okay, so what can we think about? Green fuel, ways in which we can clean up the earth, solar car maybe, a robo which can do your housework, space travel, a cure for cancer. Any of these things could be happening because of an idea born in some mind. And thereby, nobody should be forced to be a bystander in this process. So next, I'm going to show you certain hard facts. Next slide, please. So what about India and STEM? Okay, so 34% of all graduates in India are actually in STEM disciplines. Now, let us just look at, what is the eagerness to do STEM. So we look at the joint entrance exams, which is for the IITs. So there are about 16,000 seats, and every year, 1.5 million students write this. The entrance test for the MBBS seats. So how many MBBS seats? 90,000 MBBS seats. And the national eligibility cum entrance test is written by about 1.8 million students. So there is obviously a huge urge in India for people to do STEM. All right? So India has the highest number of STEM graduates in the world. And the number of women who have been choosing STEM courses in India has been steadily increasing. Now, what we find is that from a certain survey, that it says that the number of female graduates rose from 38.4% in 2014 to 15 to about 42.6% in 21-22. And if you look at the comparative numbers for US, Australia, and Germany, you can see that we are indeed higher. So thereby, quite simply, India has the highest number of female STEM graduates in the world. But then what happens? Next slide, please. Only 27% of STEM workers in India are women. And when you go to the R&D research institutes, okay, the number falls to about 13.5%. There is a report, a GOI report, which quotes about 18.6%. But you can see that obviously a lot of women, trained women power has been lost along the way. Now, this is not an Indian phenomenon alone. It is happening all over the world. And what you can see from this particular excerpt, it says that even though the number of women who graduate in STEM disciplines all over the world are higher, but they are less likely to undertake studies. Okay, so basically they are less likely to enter STEM careers, exit these careers earlier than male peers, and they are likely to publish less and more likely to be underpaid. So globally, it says that about 29.2% of the STEM workforce is made up by women. We fall short of even that. So the essential issue is summarized like this. Next slide, please. So basically, we have a leaky pipeline. This is what is normally referred to in, by the people who look at these problems, that you have a lot of graduates in STEM. However, we lose them when we go to the workforce. So the question is, why is this happening? And I'm, of course, going to give you an Indian perspective, though a lot of this actually, I think, will have global connotations. Next slide, please. So what are the reasons behind this? And this, I think, it's known to this entire audience. But nonetheless, societal norms and gender stereotypes, basically looking at the father as the provider and the protector, the mother as the person who takes care of the children, looks after the home. Now, the question is, why should it affect science careers more than other kinds of careers? And that is because science careers rarely can be bound between 9 to 5 limits, and they often encroach weekends and holidays. And thereby, it becomes very difficult to do this kind of a double role. Next slide, please. Now, cultural prejudices. So, for instance, you take this riddle. I'm sure perhaps a lot of people might have heard this riddle. A father and a son get in a car crash and are rushed to the hospital. The father dies. The boy is taken to the operating room and the surgeon says, "I can't operate on this boy. This is my son." How is this possible? Now, believe me, 40 to 75% of the people whom this is presented to cannot solve this riddle. The surgeon is the mother. And only one person in a YouTube video featuring 10 Indians who have been posed this question could get this right without prompting. So believe me, these were people who were from urban elite backgrounds. All of them were extremely comfortable in English, and only one person could solve this riddle without being prompted. So thereby, prejudice is extremely deeply ingrained, about women in STEM disciplines, and it doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the background. So I'm going to give you 3 examples which are from my personal life. One was an elderly gentleman trying to introduce my husband for a program. My husband is a well-known physicist, and he introduced me, the gentleman introduced me as the physicist in the kitchen. So this is one. So in this you can say, okay, it was an elderly retired gentleman, and okay, he has such a prejudice. The second incident I will talk to you about is essentially a very close family friend of mine, a woman younger than me, and she herself, mind you, is a computer science engineer. She is our next door neighbor. She comes to our house asking whether my husband's home because she needs help with something. And I say, okay, what is it? Can I help out? She says, no, it's some problem with the washing machine. The pipe is not fitting well. There seems to be a leak. I say, hey, hang on, I can go and do it. And I actually go and repair it. But it didn't occur to her even once that either she or I could have done the repair job, because all you needed was the right tools and it was available. The third example I will give you, and this is what makes me a bit sad, and this is amongst my own students in class, in a physics class, and in master's level physics class. If I ever want, let's say, help with the projector or maybe the microphone, okay, then I will invariably have boy students volunteering, or if I want the podium shifted off the dais, I will get boy students volunteering. On the other hand, if there is a rangoli to be done, or flower arrangements, or a song for an invocation, invariably it's the girls. And thereby, even students who are at this high level of science education have not been able to rid their minds of their prejudice. The prejudice is extremely strong. And what is a huge problem is a lack of role models, okay? A lot of the students who come from the backgrounds, I mean, our MSc classes are filled with students usually from rural and Mufassil backgrounds, and they do not have the role model of women in science. Okay. So next slide, please. Of course, access and opportunity, as we know that, STEM disciplines require slightly, higher finances and training. So the financial constraints can be a big thing. So if a family has money, they are more likely, and a limited amount of money, they're more likely to train a boy in a STEM discipline than they would a girl. Okay. Of course, there's lack of mentorship and networking for women. Okay, because in general, I think the men are not comfortable talking with the women. As a result, women in STEM tend to get isolated. And this is where I think, the digitization, the network, the availability of the internet, okay, can actually help. Because it can help women connect across institutes into some kind of a some kind of a virtual networking. Next slide, please. Okay, of course, this everybody has heard of. This is workplace challenges. And let me not spend too much time over here, except to tell you that lack of flexibility in timing sometimes can make it very difficult for women to juggle a career both in STEM as well as a family, because as I said, STEM disciplines usually demand more time. Okay, and very often women are passed over for research grants or promotions because in STEM they are expected to somehow deliver less than their male counterparts. And remember, there is a global, science is a global effort. And thereby, if you are basically putting into money into somebody who cannot be expected to deliver results at the same rate as, say, her male counterpart, people tend not to do it. Next slide, please. Okay, so what can be done? These are a whole bunch of schemes which have been put by the government. I will not go into any details of this, except to point out the third one, the Women Scientist Scheme, which is to help women who have dropped out of a research career to get back into it, which is, I think, I have seen it personally at work, and I believe that it's a very, very good scheme. Next slide, please. Okay, so maternity leaves, all right? And I'm sure this is, again, an oft-debated topic. What I would like to point out is that even in the case of adoption, okay, 12 weeks of leave are given to a woman, but a male government employee can only take 15 days. Now, adoption is a case where I don't think the role of the mother is that very strongly linked to feeding of the child and so on and so forth. So why this disparity? So obviously, child nurturing responsibilities are given to women, and with the thing that women are more nurturing, which I actually don't believe in. I think it is something that we have been trained to think. This needs to change. Next slide, please. Also, very often, right now, not such a big problem, but upper age limits, I think, have been taken off for university and research institute hirings, not in the IITs, I believe. And this, again, needs to change, because 35 or 40 is a really hard limit for a woman who's basically finished her PhD, done a couple of postdocs, gotten enough publications, probably is in the position to also start a family at the same time and then get a job. So 35 or 40 may not cut it. Tenure track is an awful thing. Please take it away. It's very unfair on women, especially, who are in the process. It coincides exactly in the time when they're trying to start a career and as well as a family. And if nurturing responsibilities are more with the women, they cannot deliver at the same rate. You have already assessed the candidate when you took the candidate, hired the candidate. Why do you need to put them through a 5 to 7 year trial period again? So please, this needs to be abolished. Okay, next slide, please. All right, as individuals, what I feel is that people need to become, women in science already need to become more powerful role models and mentors for younger women in science. And definitely networking over digital space, you don't need to be in the same space, is extremely important, because support groups are extremely essential here. And lastly, of course, we need to get rid of, gender stereotypes in our mind. We all have it, whether we like it or not. And it's very important so that we can support people whom we know, women who are desirous of pursuing careers in STEM, be they our friends, our siblings, our daughters, or our daughter-in-laws. So just next slide, please. And these are certain books I really recommend. These have been, Leelavati's Daughter and the Girl's Guide to Life and Science have basically feature the lives of women scientists in India. Lab hopping is these two women, Ashima Dogra and Nandita Jairaj. They basically went over all possible labs in India, and they have written accounts of what kind of problems women face, women and non-binary people face in doing science careers. And Women in the Wild is actually an extremely important read because it tells what it takes to be a wildlife biologist, a woman wildlife biologist, which is, most people will fear to send their daughters into such a terrain. And thank you for your attention.
Oh, wow. That's a hard act to follow. Hi, everyone. I hope you're awake and not in a food coma. I was kind of in a food coma. Wow, the lights are very bright. Yes, hello again. My name is Michelle Ho. I'm from the National University of Singapore. I teach and research there. Is it possible to go to full screen, the tech at the back? Like full screen? Full screen function? I think you have to go to the tab at the top to do. Yeah. And then view full screen. Wanted to be part of this important international conference. I flew in from Singapore last night. I would like to thank the sponsors and organizers, especially Professor Sudeshna Mukherjee, for inviting me. And here's a trigger warning. It does contain discussions of sexual violence, may be triggering or overwhelming for some. Next slide, please. So my topic is on technology-facilitated sexual violence, TFSV for short, in the context of Asia. And this is the definition by Australian scholars Henry and Powell. It refers to a range of behaviors aided or enabled by digital technologies to harm, offend, humiliate, or intimidate individuals, especially women, but also non-binary individuals. Next slide, please. So Asia, of course, we know it's a very diverse region. It's very contested, lots of cultures, languages, and populations. Very interesting. And this is to say that despite my references to Asia and Asian, I want to emphasize that Asia and Asian people are not monolithic. So the experiences of TFSV are, of course, very diverse. And Asian people may not experience TFSV in exactly the same ways. So can we go to the next slide? So I will give an overview, very short. I'll try to make it on time, of the scholarship in Asia, which is very limited, unfortunately. And then I'll discuss some findings that's based on an ongoing 3.5-year project that I've been leading as the PI in Singapore. And then I'll talk about the comparisons between how TFSV is experienced in Singapore versus South Asia, to give you some context and to distill the implications for us. And then lastly, I will give some recommendations for how we can advance safer and more inclusive digital spaces. Okay, next slide. So sexual voyeurism, digital sexual harassment, non-consensual distribution of nudes, intimate images are on this. These are all examples of TFSV, which have become increasingly prevalent in Asia, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. Next slide. So in the 2010s, South Korea faced a spy camera epidemic. You may have heard of the infamous N-room case. This was when the perpetrators recruited over 100 people, including underage girls, to film pornographic videos of themselves, and they put it up and they sold it on Telegram. In Singapore, when I based, so you can see the image there, we had a similar case that's called SG Nasi Lemak case. And this was also, again, the same sort of thing happening. There were men in the Telegram group that's private, and they circulated non-consensual images and videos of young Singaporean women. And so these two cases are quite similar in terms of how the digital sex crimes are committed. So for one, they use Telegram. So as you know or may not know, it does offer end-to-end encryption in private chats of up to 200,000 members. And the most important part is that they crowdsource the explicit content. So the members need to sort of provide the content. Okay, next slide. So in South Asia too, as you know, the first speaker was saying, there have been enormous online gender gaps, and this is estimated to be one of the largest globally, so very important. Some examples in the next slide. Experienced by women in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh include these examples: cyber stalking, impersonation, non-consensual content sharing, online sexual harassment. So I'll come back to the examples, okay? So let's go to, I think this one, yeah. So scholarship on TFSV in Asia is growing, but it's still very limited as compared to the vast research that's been done in Australia, North America, and the UK. So in the context of Asia, there have been very few studies that have looked at this, but in a national or regional context. So I'll show you some examples. Next slide. So this is in China. I think there are some studies on, let me see, internet dating sexual violence. And then the next slide shows you non-consensual content sharing, including from spy cameras in Korea. So I've talked about this. And then the next slide shows you online sexual harassment and gender-based digital abuse in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So these studies do demonstrate how similar to, next slide please, to the West, more women in Asia experience TFSV than men, and also that TFSV negatively impacts victim survivors' everyday lives, as well as mental health, relationships with others. So I think these you know already, right? So while important, many of these studies, they lack an understanding of victim survivors' experiences from their perspective, right? And why is this? Because a lot of the research that's out there, it's more quantitative, but there are some exceptions. So a qualitative study that employ methods such as interviews and focus groups that engage directly with the victim survivors. And these studies would illuminate the nuances of how TFSV manifests. So for instance, next slide, Samba Sivan and all highlight that because of South Asia's high gender inequality, cultural norms and expectations, so the previous presenter already talked about this, I don't have to talk too much, as well as emerging technology with much fewer users being women, seemingly minor infractions, such as a stranger lifting a participant's profile photo or leaking their name, carried significant consequences. Sorry, that's the next slide. Yeah, this is a quote from there. And then my team also found in the next slide that due to high internet and technology use in Singapore, next slide please. Sorry, yeah, this is the quote, that we found that completely unplugging from technology is not an option, despite the harms that they may have experienced as victim survivors. So it's not a question of can we ban technology or not, because people are like, no, this is our livelihood. You cannot ban it, okay? So these are just some, I guess, experiences that's coming from the research. So based on these studies, we can say, next slide, please, more research employing qualitative methodologies is important. So not only is there a lack of data, firstly, lack of data on TFSV experience in Asia, but also a lack of theorization. I think Geeta was talking about that. So lack of theorization on TFSV in Asia. And also that current scholarship, mine included, they draw mainly on terminology that's coming from the West. So we're like, okay, are we just applying Western theory to Asian objects or what? Or can we have re-theorization that's coming from Asia? Okay, that's my stance. So I move on, next slide, to talk about some of the findings that's based on the project that I've been leading. And this is called CASMIDA, Campus Sexual Misconduct in the Digital Age. So CASMIDA is the acronym. And it looks like the intersections between TFSV as well as campus sexual violence. And CASMIDA is a very, next slide, you can see our team, very interdisciplinary team of researchers. And we are all based in Singapore. We're all very different nationalities, different ethnicities from Asia. So, and then the next slide, we can see some of the project details. So if you can follow us and find out more about our project. But basically, the project informs how we understand new forms of gender-based violence in Asia, like TFSV, alongside the impact of technological affordances. And we try to contribute to scholarship at the intersections of feminist media studies as well as Asian studies. The next slide shows us the methodologies that we've used. So we use surveys, quantitative surveys, as well as qualitative semi-structured interviews, as well as digital data collection. So this means that we ask the participants to volunteer sort of a set of content that they will be able to give us, and then we'll have a look at what, based on their experience of TFSV. So potentially triggering, but we thought maybe it's interesting to see also what they experience based on their content. So anyway, the next slide shows, oh, what happened to my slide? Okay, never mind. I think that there was a missed slide, but it's okay. So this is based on I will only talk about some of the findings. So this is based on NUS students only, 3,020 participants. The bigger project is something like 7,000 participants or something. So this is maybe like half, less than half. So can we go to the next slide? I think this is the criteria, inclusion criteria, so who we asked to participate in the project. And then the next slide shows some findings. So one will be high prevalence of TFSV, and then gaps in understanding TFSV. So these are we're sort of written up as a manuscript that is now under review with the Journal of Gender Studies, so it might come out soon and you can read about it. So anyway, can we go to the next slide? Yes, so we found a high prevalence of TFSV amongst NUS students, so nearly 40% of survey respondents reported experiencing TFSV. So this is higher than the numbers that were previously found by other surveys that were done in Singapore. Next slide. Yeah, so you can see from this survey, the three most prevalent categories of TFSV are digital sexual harassment, IBSA, as well as sexual voyeurism. You can see the numbers there. And we go to the next slide, then we can see that among the interviewees, there's higher prevalence of TFSV as well as campus sexual violence, so approximately 80%. This is very, very high. And our interviewees have also talked to us about how they see TFSV as very pervasive. So to give you some examples, next slide, there's some quotes. So they say, for example, that these kinds of accidents have happened to me or to other people, my sister, my mom, my friends on the internet. It's just everywhere. And then somebody else said, too many of my friends have had their photo taken of them without their consent or discreetly. Usually they spot the person, and it definitely puts them in a very bad state afterwards. It's actually very common today. So it's telling when the interviewees, recount stories of not just themselves, but other people who have experienced this. And we know that this is actually happening a lot, okay? The next finding will be the gaps in understanding TFSV. So most interviewees appeared to understand the broad description of TFSV as a form of sexual violence. They were less certain, however, of the nuances and the different categories. So the next slide shows you some examples. So one interviewee who had been hacked and gaslit by her close friends, she said she was surprised to discover that the term for revenge pornography was the revenge pornography part, but she knew by the description that this situation is a thing. So this is actually quite common among our interviewees who recognize, okay, they know that TFSV is harmful, right? But they don't know really the terms to use the category. So there are a lot of terms: upskirting, spy cameras, revenge porn, sexual voyeurism. And it makes people really confused. I mean, I'm confused half the time. So, you don't expect your participants to know everything as well. But it does show that there is a disconnect between personal experiences of TFSV and the labels that we use in scholarship in academia. So if we go to the next slide, and I want to turn to the comparisons between Singapore and South Asia. So I'll begin with some of the similarities that I can glean based on existing studies, followed by differences. So one similarity would be this: high prevalence of TFSV. So in Samba Sivan's in all study, you can see the number: 72% of women from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh reported experiencing online abuse, and then Nova and all study showed 69.3% of women and then 30.7% of men. So the rates for men are actually increasing. So it's not just a woman thing. And this is based in Bangladesh. And then from my study, we see that there's around 40% of men and women experiencing TFSV in the surveys, but 80% coming from the interviews. So taken together, it just shows very high prevalence of TFSV in Asia. The next similarity, next slide, is the need to recognize each country's specific social cultural context when we do TFSV research. So for example, South Asian countries, the largest barriers include online safety, driven in part by fear of contending with harassment and risk to one's reputation. And such a context is different from the Western context. And we also observe something similar in Singapore. So we notice gaps in understanding TFSV as a harmful behavior, which the people often downplay because of the stigma of shame that's surrounding sexual violence victim survivors. So I think this is also common in South Asia. So such attitudes to trivialize TFSV stem from very conservative gender norms, which is again similar in South Asia. So one common element, next slide, is actually how, due to male privilege and patriarchal practices in these Asian countries, men are able to make use of technology to enact power over women. So the root cause of TFSV and any form of sexual violence is, of course, power. In the next slide, we can see that there are also some differences, such as the types of TFSV that were reported. So in South Asian countries, we can see the most prevalent categories were cyber stalking, impersonation, personal leakages. In Singapore, and this is just a snapshot from the study that I mentioned. In the next slide, you can see another table. Next slide. Yeah, so this is coming from my project. And we can see that the three most prevalent TFSV forms are the three that I mentioned already. So it's quite hard to explain these numbers because they're taken from different studies, but I will say that there are some commonalities between cyber stalking and digital sexual harassment, which are consistently high across Singapore and South Asia, probably due to the gender and cultural norms that entitle men to behave in harmful ways towards women. The other, I guess, TFSV categories, although less prevalent, are no less significant. Okay, can we go to the next slide? So although more research is needed, what I can say that these forms are more personal in nature and frequently involve an acquaintance or maybe family, former partner, or friend. So this means that the TFSV may appear more threatening because they're perpetrated by not a stranger but somebody that they know, which makes things quite complicated. In the next slide, we can see that personal leakages cause victim survivors a lot of damage to social reputation and dignity because it implies a woman's presumed complicity and looseness even when the release was non-consensual. This is, of course, a classic example of victim blaming. So to a larger extent, such a situation is more dire, I think, for South Asian women than perhaps it is for Singaporean women. As Rahila, an NGO staff for Women's Safety Helpline in Pakistan puts it, maybe next slide? Yeah, this one, okay. Sharing a girl's picture may not be a big deal for US people, but a fully clothed photo can lead to suicide here in conservative regions of Pakistan. So that was a very powerful quote from that study. So I move on quickly to the implications of the studies for you, and maybe you want to talk about the recommendations. So these are just some implications. So the first, in the next slide, is the need to build greater awareness of TFSV and how it operates by confronting the norms in Asian contexts. And this involves maybe educating young internet users about how to equitably and respectfully interact with women online rather than call for women alone to claim online spaces, right? And so such education ought to be extended to all online users, not only women, so that they know how to treat one another with respect and also ask for consent within digital spaces, which is sometimes a bit of a gray area, as we know. So let me see. Yeah, this is just to say that the norms stem from a larger history and tradition, which we can see being amplified online. So In the next slide, we can see that, although the studies have shown that cyber stalking and digital sexual harassment were the most prevalent categories, it is the more personal forms of like IBSA and personal leakages that prove to be the most damaging. I think this has to do with, largely with the stigmas that are surrounding women's sexuality as well as social reputation, which not only impacts the victim survivor, but also the family and the community extended network, right? So let me see, I think we're next slide. Yeah, so this is what I think the stigmas. Okay, can we go to the next slide? So what we need to do is to shift the perspectives of TFSV and sexual violence from victim-blaming narratives to putting the blame on the perpetrators as well as the systems that enable them. We have to ask, why is it that male privilege and patriarchal practices are allowed to continue in Asian countries, and how do they impact sexual violence experienced by women and other marginalized individuals in these societies? So to address this, we need to denormalize TFSV. Let me see. Okay, can we go to the next slide? So yeah, I guess another implication is, of course, developing formal support systems such as laws and policies to criminalize TFSV and discourage this. I won't go into this because this is not really my expertise. I'm sure there are people who have expertise in the legal issues. So can we skip on to the recommendations? Yeah, here. Okay, so based on this, some recommendations, which I think already been said, this morning as well, so I'll go through them quickly. So one is, of course, this morning Dr. Kaur mentioned digital literacy education, which is, the next slide, which is for all users. So all users to be responsible online citizens. But the other thing that I wanted to say, the next slide, is in addition, we need sexual literacy education, because it is about, sexual literacy is less about how to be safe online than it is about how to navigate emotionally and physically safe sexual encounters. It is about teaching the young people about sexual consent, respect, and boundaries, so they can learn to make decisions about the romantic relations that they enter, right? So increasingly, this is becoming online because a lot of people socialize online. And so what I'm saying here is that digital literacy education alone is insufficient for teaching them information about sex, about gender, sexualities, their own bodies. So we cannot assume that, they know everything just because they have digital literacy education. But one barrier that's happening, next slide, please. So one barrier that's happening in Asian contexts is, of course, the conservative cultural norms around women's sexuality. So it remains taboo to actually discuss this with your friends, with your family. But without such conversations, we fail to prepare our young women and men for navigating the contours of sex and relationships, and least of all, sexual violence. And then lastly, this is my last point. Thank you. So lastly, laws and policies to criminalize and discourage TFSV must take into account regional differences. So the countries that I talked about are, of course, very diverse, and people have differing levels of understanding TFSV. So what appears to be best practices for dealing with TFSV in Singapore may not be the same in India, of course. So what we can do is that the researchers based in a specific nation could work with the stakeholders, so maybe the government or other people, to figure out the best practices for their own citizens. So just go to conclusion. Yeah, so just 3 takeaway points. More research on TFSV in Asia, sorely needed. The other thing is that the next stage will be in the West, what they're moving on to is talking about looking into TFSV perpetrator behavior. So why is it that people perpetrate TFSV? This is the next stage for us. The last point I leave you with is it's important not to generalize TFSV experience, but you must situate it within the very specific social cultural context, because TFSV is a complex issue, is a vast complex issue, and we can only try to understand it and find ways to support as best as we can. Thank you very much.
Sharpai? So I'm going to use my discretion and maybe not screen the video that we have. Yeah, that can be shared maybe with the audiences later. So, I mean, we've had 3 very, very interesting presentations. Shall we throw the house open to questions? So, if the hand comes from the back, I won't be able to see it. Yeah. Will someone pass the mic? Or would you just want to come ahead?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My question is to Shabri Bhattacharya, ma'am. Ma'am, as we are speaking about women in STEM, my research is, I'm just particularly focused on women in technology, where like people who are working in software industry now. Why don't we speak about the social structures and the family issues. Why don't we speak about the structural problems of the industry itself? So there's no, like my question is, like there is no structural, what do you call? Flexibility in working hours. There's no, like what happened in COVID, like there was a flexible working hours. Why don't we continue that? Whenever the people is, so they made compulsions, maybe I call it because of capitalization or maybe industrial structures where they want to, okay, whatever it is. So don't we think that structure is a major problem of an industry? So.
Shall we take a couple of questions? Gather them. Mary.
I have a question for Dr. Michelle Ho. So you've done a study that is just for my understanding, it's a multi-country study or it's multi-ethnicity in Singapore? Okay, okay. Secondly, I was curious about your question, why is there patriarchy or why is there male dominance in Asian contexts, which struck me as rather odd because there's patriarchy everywhere. The US is full of this. The stuff you're talking about, no other country has more of it than the US. More forms of online violence than you know. The number of even offline violence is comparable to Asia. So I'm curious about that. I think maybe you need to distinguish between something as vague and large as patriarchy and sexual practices. Because it is true that countries like, I mean, people of Asian origin, on the whole, do get socialized into more, quote-unquote, notions of respectable sexuality, and forms of non-respectable sexuality are outside marriage. So, which may not be true elsewhere. It's not true in Africa or the Caribbean or in Europe as of now. So maybe you need to make more distinctions about what you think is specific to Asia and Asian gender relations and questions of sexuality. It's just a suggestion.
Maybe one more from the back, students. There's one question there. Yes, please. No, go ahead. Personally.
I guess it's me. My question is to ma'am. Regarding the references to women scientists, I'm a woman scientist, so an odd one in this auditorium. But this kind of the way one is addressed. So I've seen in many conferences where the woman is actually the chair and she is being thanked for being such a wonderful mother-like figure. And no reference is made to her qualification, what got her that job or anything like that. So, but where are the voices? Who's speaking about it? Why aren't they there in our larger committees, DST, DBT? Why don't these things get spoken? And why do women constantly endorse that mother image? What do you think?
So we'll take the answers and maybe a few more questions later.
So I will first answer your question. See, the point is that let us understand the point behind an IT industry, right? Any kind of an industry, I guess profit is the bottom line. So now if you are going to, have a choice between two people, one who is going to not ask for flexible timings, is going to work on your timeline, and the other person who wants a whole bunch of concessions, you don't know they seem to be equally qualified. Chances are you're going to go for the person who doesn't make these extra demands, right? So I think that is partially the reason that the industry is actually heading away from what it allowed during the pandemic. Okay, so this is my feeling. And the truth is that, it should not be done, okay? But how to make people actually do it, I have frankly no clue. The second, to answer your question, yes, this is actually a problem. And, I met a lady who headed a medical research section, an Indian origin lady, who headed a medical research section in the US in a very major hospital, I forget which. And her research students, she invariably has to start off with telling them, I am not your mother. Okay, because the students normally think that they can get away with more affection and, leeway when they don't deliver at the same rate with the woman supervisor than with the male supervisor. Now, I think there are voices who are, complaining about this, but I think what we need to do is strengthen the network. Okay, so we know that there are other voices and that will strengthen each of our voices. But right now, I don't think there is a overall India effort to kind of protest this. I agree with you.
I'll make this quick. Thank you very much for your comment. I think maybe the question was slightly misunderstood. I'm just not saying that only Asia has male privilege and patriarchal practices. I was sort of questioning why it's allowed to continue, because it impacts sexual violence, how women experience, or of course, marginalized individuals experience sexual violence. And it's also very, I would say it's also very nuanced and contextualized in Asia, as it's just different from the West. And this was, I was talking about it in the context of we need to stop victim blaming, for one, because that is at least from my project, that is the initial reaction whenever people hear about other people's experiences with TFSP, then the immediate reaction would be, oh, it's her fault because she put those images online on her own social media. And then there would be the next step, which is to say that, look, she did put it on social media, and maybe she consented to it at first, but she didn't consent to non-consensual distribution, or maybe consent to it being made into deep fakes and everything. So that was sort of the point I was trying to make, to move away from victim blaming to sort of examining the larger structures, the patriarchal practices, as well as the structures in society that enable these normalization of victim blaming. Yeah.
Mary? Okay. Any more comments, questions from anyone? Students?
Thank you so much. My question is for Dr. Michelle. So you mentioned about sexual literacy and teaching young women about boundaries, safe sex, and how to handle their emotion. But is there any active engagement or that you are aware of is happening to educate the parents as well, to provide an environment of openness and support where kids are able to talk about these things?
That's an excellent suggestion. Yeah, I think I didn't have time to put it in the paper, but it's in the larger paper. That, of course, it's not just about the young people who need to be educated. The parents, the older generation need to be re-educated as well. because we don't assume, the young people know what they're doing, and if we wanted to talk to them, then obviously the parents need to be re-educated. In terms of what is going on the ground, I think very little is going on. So sex education primarily, at least in Singapore, it's mostly only for the children. And that's also a question of if they receive that education, because the parents are allowed to opt them out of the education. So that's very terrible on all fronts. Yeah, I'm sure the similar things are happening here as well. So if the parents wanted to be educated, I think it's optional. Like they really have to go and look at gender equality nonprofit and look at, there's a program that's called Birds and Bees, which is happening. And then they have to go and sign up for it and be, volunteer for that kind of re-education, which I can see a lot of parents wouldn't bother to do. So that is an uphill task, yeah. But thank you for that.
Any others? Okay, so I'll quickly end with a couple of thoughts, which is like what I started with, which is what Professor Bhadra sort of said, that is the world really becoming flat? Because the Thomas Friedman's idea, which she was starting as her assumption point, actually she herself recognizes as she goes along that no, it is actually not becoming flat. It's becoming much, much more uneven, much, much more unstable, and it is definitely producing more and more inequalities. And the digital divide can be, of course, reduced with more and more access, which is what, as women, we should be fighting for more access to the digital, and less surveillance and less control on women's access to the internet, to the virtual world. I think Sharbari, of course, was talking about something that probably I've spent now 20-25 years working on, and my request to Sudeshna is that we should have a full conference separately on STEM and feminism, feminist approaches to STEM. But just quickly, to reiterate what you were saying, I think one of the shifts that we have made in our feminist understandings of STEM disciplines is to stop blaming society, which is outside, but start looking at the STEM institutions and cultures and what they are doing to reproduce hierarchies and patriarchal hierarchies and sexual violence. Like again, going back to Losha, this is something I say again and again. There was not a single, despite we assume that science students should be accessing technology better, not a single naming of anybody from the science community. And when we further looked into this, we recognized that one of the reasons that young women do not complain in a scientific institution is something that we've been talking about, is that if they're working, for instance, in a lab, and if they complain of sexual harassment, and they have to be relocated to another lab, which is what generally happens, rather than PI getting suspended. What happens to the girls is that they lose entire control over the work that they've done, because it doesn't belong to them. So you expect them to start in another lab from scratch, and that's a lot. And so we keep putting the onus on the girl, you should complain, but actually it's probably very, very difficult for women to do that. But this is a theme that is very close to my heart. And I think as Michelle, to me what one of the striking things that came out of what Michelle was saying is that we still think that women use the internet and they use social media for leisure, for recreation. Not that there's any problem, they should be doing it. But I think what she pointed out very strongly is that to tell women to not use it because of the threats and the dangers and the violence is like telling women, sit back. The Pinjara Tod movement actually brought this out. Should we be put behind? And Mary is here. Saksham was a fantastic report which told you that in order to protect, do not control the freedom. So our principles of our movement, which we've been sort of already there for us, can be actually deployed to understand what's going on in the virtual world. So instead of telling young women, which happens all the time, you don't use it, you be safe, you be careful, you do this, you do that, I think we need to go beyond that a model of surveillance and control of women's access and use of digital. So I just want to finally, so like she said, that it is sometimes not leisure, it's livelihood also. So when you're telling women to take the access away from them, you might be actually taking access away of livelihood, which I think is absurd. So absurdly patriarchal. But I would like to just, if I may, close the discussion by saying that yes, we recognize that the digital is real, the virtual is real. It is felt very really by all women. It is violent, it is risky, it's unsafe. At the same time, I would like us also to, I hope there are more papers tomorrow which talk about how women are owning the space, how women are claiming that space, how women are actually using it both for political activism, like Pink Chadi campaign led to feminism in India. Okay, FII, today we all refer to it. We want any database or archive for women's questions, we go to FII for students, right? And it's a wonderful way of using that. For feminist archiving, for instance, and accessible across, not necessarily in a physical archive. But on the other hand, as I mentioned, agents of ish, or you look at the hundreds of reels that are there and women dancing to their glory, you know, with great abundance and freedom and expression of their sexuality. And I think it can be thought of actually in more empowering ways also, maybe while we recognize that it's an extremely violent world, the virtual world, and it's an extremely violent world, much more violent to women who are more vulnerable if they get access. But then again, I want to talk about a blog like Saviri, where Dalit women take up the internet to talk about their issues and their concerns. So I think it's complex. And I think we'll just end with complexity. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shabari. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Bula. And thank you, everyone, for being a great audience.
back end of the day, but I'm sure it's going to be one of the most exciting sessions because I'm really excited at the wonderful titles of all the paper presenters that we have in our session today. So without much ado, I'm Dr. Priyanka Mathur from Jain University. Really delighted, and I'd like to place my formal thanks to Dr. Sudeshna, my very old dear friend, for conducting this brilliant conference and for having me over here. First, of course, in this technical session, we have the symposium, which the coordinator is Dr. Rituparna Chakravarti here. Yes, can I have you over here, please? Thank you. So the symposium coordinator is Dr. Rituparna Chakravarti, and I'll hand it over to her. The symposium is on digital violence and intersectionality, navigating identity, power, and exclusion on online spaces. We have 4 wonderful papers, which one including of Rituparna. We have Dr. Shantaraju S., who's going to be speaking. We have Shantaraju here? Yeah. Why don't you come and take your seat here, please? Dr. Shantaraju will be speaking on digital dangers, virtual interactions, and exploitative experiences in online dating among young working women. That's a fabulous piece, so much needed. Then we have Dia Mariam Chako. Do we have Dia here? Yes, come and take your space. Take your seat, Dia. Dia will be speaking on queer digital orientations, navigating experiences of embodiment in virtual spaces. We then have Dr. Madhavi Rangaswamy. Warm welcome to you, Dr. Madhavi, who will be speaking on navigating online risks, understanding adolescent risk-taking behavior, gender differences, and adapting preventive strategies. And of course, we have Rituparna also. Please take your seat, Rituparna.
Good evening, everyone. We had a lot of discussion since morning on the gender, power, technology, and intersectionality. Today's our symposium would be primarily discussing digital violence in different forms, in different communities or in cohorts. And one of the primary things that we would be focusing on is not only violence, because that's something that we often talk about, but different degrees of violations and microaggressions that happen that often gets de-escalated and doesn't get discussed often and gets normalized through that. Because when we talk about digital spaces, a lot of lines gets blurred. Like one of the questions that often comes to mind is whether similar power hierarchies and dynamics play in digital spaces, which often actually boasts about equity of access and equity of representation in comparison to physical spaces. Also, the lines get blurred between private and public spaces. So today we have 4 presentations in this symposium. First, Dr. Shantaraju, who is from the media department in Christ University. He will be speaking on the online dating experiences and violences in that space among young women. Then Dia Mariam Chako from psychology, she will be talking about the experiences of queer women and their embodied experiences in digital spaces. Then Dr. Madhavi, who has a background in cognitive neuroscience, again from Christ University. She will be talking about the adolescents, how they navigate the digital space and disinhibition in their behavior. And then finally, I'll be talking about the representational violence and microaggression in digital spaces. Maximum 10 minutes, maybe we'll wrap up in a second. So we'll start with Dr. Shantaraju.
Thank you. Can I stand there? Can I go to next slide? Like 2 more? Yeah. Thank you. Good evening. This is an offshoot of a couple of papers I was able to publish in the last couple of years. As someone who's interested in media and psychology and has a formal degree in both, I kind of intrigued by how technology, intersection, and gender issues, play a huge role in shaping what we are. largely our understanding of the world is through technology, at least my generation, not through critical reading. And what comes on these social bubbles really matters because what is shaping us is what we are going to share with others. Well, this was a difficult study, not a big researcher publishing so many things. Very few I have done. Among just 5 publications I have done, 3 were actually on dating apps. Why difficult? Because women were not ready to come and talk about their experience, exploitative experience which happened to them through dating apps. That's why it was a difficult challenge in recruiting the respondent itself. So I had to go through another way of recruiting participants. Well, dating app, the whole culture of dating itself is largely urban phenomenon, and it is a complex digital human interaction because you don't know whether you are talking to genuine people or whether you're talking to people itself. That's questionable actually. You don't know who they are, which gender, all that. All of us are born to some one or other form of social media networks. At least starting with before Facebook, of course, we had other forms of social media network, but in a limited way. But what the social media networking companies, other companies which run these things understood is, yes, we can run something else customized to each and every aspiration. That's where dating apps became popular in the post-2010. The self and the other consciously bypasses this digital footprint because you have some aspiration. You're also doubtful whether you're talking to other person genuinely. And at the same time, you want to be with that person, not just because of sheer reason of getting connected, but you, as a social being, you want to be socially connected, not without any other expectation. Well, largely dating app is, through my research, it's clearly one gender dominant because of, if you use dating apps, a boy or a man or a male gender will be accepting everybody, which app shows, but where the female will not accept in that way. The acceptance for female is much different, probably in the ratio of 1:1,000. That's the way it works. Highly accessible because it's very easy. It's very easy. Anybody can install, anybody can use it. You don't need to pay. If you pay, of course, there are certain perks with that. Statistically speaking, it has no negative effect. It has no negative effect because large number of people are not affected. I'm talking about these individual cases which are not reported at all. Let's say I'm cheated or I'm bluffed or I'm exploited. I'm not the one who put in public that I'm exploited. Especially if I'm female, female gender, I would never put it in public forum that I'm exploited, I'm cheated, I'm sexually abused. Nobody puts it in that way. So not reported itself is something big, but going by statistics was problematic. So I had to change my methodology. Next slide, please. Well, data collection, what I did was I recruited a couple of my students, one from Bombay, one from Bengal, and asked her whether she can talk to her PG mates and others, they can participate in the research. And we created an email ID where it's a common email ID where anybody can use it without their names or anything. A common name of the email ID only appears there. That's how we recruited. There was no need of showing their face also. That's how we collected the data. I was able to get 20 young working professionals. At the time, it was last phase of pandemic, third phase of pandemic. That's the time when I largely collected data. I did continue the research later, but what I'm speaking today is from that experience. Next slide. Yeah, their experience does vary according to the rewards they had. I tried corroborating their personality traits and their experience. Despite cultural diversity, they're from Bombay, Delhi, Kolkata, Bangalore, Chennai, because of IT companies. Most of them were working in the IT company circles. Their experience were actually same. The way they were exploited are the kind of interactions they had with their partners, their virtual partners, at some point which turned into physical partners. That was kind of common actually, irrespective of where they are from. Next slide. Okay. Among distressing narratives shared by participants, disloyal dating is often something which most of the participants mentioned, that they didn't even realize in the initial time that the same boy was chatting with multiple people or dating with multiple people. In fact, a couple of girls mentioned that 3 girls were invited to the same space at the same time. Like, what kind of relationships are these? It's quite difficult to understand these kind of things. And it took some time for them to understand that they were actually exploited in many ways. At least 10 participants were recounted experiencing such abuses on multiple occasions of different things like slapping or hostility, violent behavior. When the girl decides to end the relationship, the kind of violent behavior men have showed, those are all common things among 10 participants out of 20. Next slide, please. Despite all 5 personality traits being like associating personality traits and dating abuse, agreeableness and extraversion seem to be common among all of them. Who are exploited, especially emotionally and sexually and physical assault. Like in a small scale, in a descriptive statistics I did, it was highly correlational. Can you? Okay. The common exploitation forms were like stalking, both online, offline. Sometimes, following them even after meeting without their consent to know where they live so that they can blackmail them later, or they want to surprise, or all those things. 4 girls had to change their residence because the boys had surprise visits to their PGs and place they stay. And various forms of psychological effects, including making girls feel guilt that I did use this app. It was my mistake to install this app, so I deserve this. I deserve this victimization. So in a couple of instances, these girls lost the confidence and courage to walk in public alone. They always had to have someone along with them. So as a man, I'm not afraid to walk in front of anyone. But for these girls, it was difficult, especially because they're not living in the same town. They are from different town. They are working women, and self-blame, self-isolation, and those are the common things observed among those 20 women. Next slide. Coping mechanism. How do they cope? Most of them sought their support through their roommates or immediate seniors. So their peers were kind of, counselors for them. So they were afraid to go and seek professional help. That was one more common observation. In few cases, 3 participants sought professional help. That means they went to a psychologist, talked to them because of all the issues going through. And at least 8 had uninstalled the apps forever. Some have reinstalled. It's kind of cyclic relationship. So after a couple of months, they felt, okay, now I've learned the lesson, let me reinstall. That number was also there. What these girls do who are reinstalling the app was they were more careful. They do more background check. And at least they would take another girl, their friends, to the same place, tell them that, give a call. If I'm not comfortable here, give me a call, ring a call, I'll come out. So those are the mechanisms they have found. Those who decide to continue with the app. Okay. The participants had opted for popular dating apps through peer pressure. I think this is done. Anyway, I covered it. Lastly, what's my observation in my research is first-time users tend to be more exploited because they installed the app or started accepting the proposals because of curiosity or loneliness, or they didn't have any friends in a new town, all that. Those are the reasons. But those who kept using for some time, they knew how to get away with these things. And in one case, out of 20, one case, the girl was exploited for around 8 lakhs of money as well. Thankfully, they were ready. They were ready to come and share all these stories. There is narratives, actually, than stories. She had to tell her parents that I'm really broke and I'm in the verge of, losing my life. Only one girl was dare enough to talk to parents. So here, the parental relationship between the dating app users and things which they're going through is also something interesting which I could not explore. These women didn't have a support system. They didn't even know how to put across these things. She went and spoke to her parents only because of the money issue. Only in 2 cases, police case has been filed when the stalking was too much, and one among 2 was slapped in public. That's how she was taken by her friends to police station just to make the boy a little bit scared or something like that. The boy was called to police station. That's only 1 case. Out of 20, 2 cases went to police station, 3 cases went to professional support, 1 went to parents. Rest of them kind of, carry this burden that, it's our mistake to use these things. We should have used carefully. That was the next slide. Yeah. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So my topic is queering digital orientations, navigating embodiment. It's the same one, symposium. Right. So similar to what a lot of the presentations were talking about, how digital space was viewed for a very long time as this realm of endless possibilities where one can present themselves in ways that we cannot really do in our physical world, basically away from the constraints of our physical reality. But as most of the presenters have spoken about, that this no longer is the reality, that there is this distinction between online and offline existence may not really hold true. Can you go to the next slide? That even the way that we experience digital spaces is very embodied. And what we mean by this is, for example, just based on what Sir was talking about, using dating apps. When we use dating apps, it's not a very detached experience. We experience, like all those women are telling, we experience anxiety, we experience desire, we experience hope. So it's not a detached experience. Even using these digital spaces is a very embodied experience. So to really capture that aspect of it, what scholars say is that we need to move from these grand spatial narratives, even though the grand spatial narratives talk about how space is governed by institutions and structures, but there's a need to focus on the everyday micro aspects, and that's how we really get into understanding the embodied experiences, because at the end of the day, space is very lived, felt, and practiced. Next slide. So I take from Moret's idea of media phenomenology, where they talk about the idea of spatio-temporal doubleness. What they mean by this is that, for example, when we are using a social media app, we're existing in that space, but we're also existing in the inescapable physical environment. So we are simultaneously existing in multiple spaces. So it's not that these 2 spaces are collapsing into one, nor is it that we are focusing on one over the other. We're simultaneously existing in both these spaces. Things as well as doing digital, active on digital spaces. But the question arises is that seamless integration the same for all bodies? Because the next slide, building on what the question of the dating apps, why is that the women who are using the dating apps didn't have that seamless integration, that they did have to be aware of the possible dangers, they did face possible harassment? Why is that those people didn't have that seamless integration towards using that digital space? And even if you go in the question of dating apps, further, if you look at queer bodies, there's hardly any representation unless the apps is specifically meant for queer bodies. It's a very, when they open an app, it is a very binary presentation and expectations of how relationships would look like. So there's this sort of myth of seamless digital connectivity. Like the question only a lot of the participants did talk about access to digital spaces, yes, but the question is even if there is access to space, does that mean the way that we can navigate the space is the same for everyone? So that is why we need to look at it from the lens of critical phenomenology. Specifically, I use Queer Phenomenology by Sarah Ahmed, where she talks about how bodies, she builds on Lefebvre's idea of orientations in space. She talks about how bodies are oriented in space by space. What she means by this is that the space that we occupy are shaped by dominant norms, specifically heteronormativity. And when bodies that align with dominant norms, when they have the ability to freely extend into the space and navigate. So over time, when these bodies constantly are able to extend into the space, almost this familiar path is formed. So whichever body that comes later who fits the dominant norms already has this familiar path. So it almost seems as though these norms are inherent, which isn't the case. But when a queer body again comes in face with that familiar path, they experience what she knows as moments of disorientation because their bodies are not able to extend into that same space. So my study was actually set in the state of Kerala, although it doesn't directly look into digital spaces, but I've taken aspects of it, where the participants talk about living in that space as a queer woman in itself. They constantly experience moments of disorientation because I won't get into it, the space of Kerala in depth, but they talk about how Kerala in itself is a space of paradox because it reports very highly in a lot of developmental indices, but the lived reality of marginalized communities does not really reflect the higher markers that are showing in these developmental indices. And Navneeta Mukul, in her monograph, speaks about a concept known as lesbian hauntings, where she says that the very idea of the existence of queer women in Kerala spaces was brought about with the lesbian suicides in the 90s. The fact that that is how the existence of queer women was acknowledged in that space shows us the various anxieties and anxieties associated with queer bodies in that space. Next slide. But I'll be talking about how these women spoke about. One is, this is the realities of their physical space, the constrictions and disorientation they face in the physical space. But the same women, how they mention what they experience in the digital spaces as well. So building on Ahmed's idea that when they come into these digital spaces are also shaped by the same similar norms of the physical realm, and they talk about the experiences of being stopped in these spaces. And one such way they talk is digital compartmentalization. The queer women talk about how a lot of them engage in creating various Instagram accounts. One is for their family, one is for their friends, one is for people who the queer individuals they interact with. So that seamless integration into the digital world is not the same for queer individuals. Their embodiment is often fragmented because this is how they present that the family knows this account and the rest of their the friends. Even within friends, sometimes they have an account different for friends and their queer friends as well. So this often places a lot of affective labor on queer individuals to go through this sort of fragmented embodiment. And the reason for this is, of course, Kerala is a space which they already spoke about. There's very high social surveillance for people who don't fit the norms, but they also talk about the same fears continue to exist in online spaces as well. Some of the participants reported how they even were apprehensive to they were apprehensive to posts or follow pages about related to queer groups because they were afraid that people in their life would see that and assume their identity. So there's a lot of nuance to this also, that a lot of queer spaces do have private accounts to ensure that the spaces are safe, but again, these people question that. There's another problem that arises that a lot of people don't want to tell their identity but still want to be part of these groups. So then how is that then possible? A lot of the ways in which some presenters had spoken at the start as well is how queer women do engage in sort of self-censorship. So they spoke about how sometimes there's also a question of why do you have multiple accounts. So they go through the task of sitting and muting every individual who they think would cause possible harm to them. And also, as someone had mentioned, the use of asterisks in the words such as queer, like you'll put asterisks for Q so that these things don't get detected. They also talk about, of course, when they post pictures with their female partner, etc., that does sometimes get flagged by Instagram. So we can see that the space of Instagram in itself, the way it's shaped is not is again fitting well, within that binary norms. Next slide. So Emma talks about the fact that when individuals don't align with the expected dominant norms, they are perceived as out of place. And when you're out of place, you're also hyper visible. So the participants talk about when they are hyper visible, they perceive that some sort of one of the possible punishments that they receive to be aligned back into the expected line is through hypersexualization of queer bodies, which they experience in their everyday life, but also in the digital spaces as well. And this also comments on the questioning of the authenticity of their queer identities, because the only way that it can make sense is through their fetishization and hypersexualization. And they also talk about receiving comments online about this not being a real relationship, or that they have not experienced men enough as to why they're queer. So queer theory mainly rose out of the need to move past essential identities and move past the idea that there's some true essence to being a woman, that queer theory moves against that. But again, we see in the digital spaces that this gets reinforced further, that there is true essence to how a woman should be. And further, when we asked the participants whether they were afraid of the surveillance of their queer desires, they said it's not just that, but it's also just as a woman in that space, women should not be expressing their sexual desires, so it's not just about their queer bodies. Which a lot of people have already spoken about. The need to look at it from a intersectional lens. Specifically, I look into a critical intersectional lens where we also look into the history and cultural context of a particular space, and also add the concept of world making, because queer individuals don't have an already existing social existence, so they have to build and create a space for themselves. That's all. Yeah, the next slide is just an example of what, this was a news article that came out yesterday where an individual was making changes in their CV, and AI automatically changed their surname to an upper caste name. So we see that because they're working in an academic setting, so the AI assumed that they would have an upper caste name. So we see that understanding experience of marginalized individuals in the space is important, but also looking into how the space themselves is shaped by the norms. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. A short introduction to myself. I'm someone who studies brain and behavior. I'm a cognitive neuroscience person. And what I want to present is our understanding of how the brain supports behavior. And I hope it gives you a window to look at certain things in a different light. And next slide, please. So there'll be some colorful slides, I guess. Oh, no. Where's the slides? All right. So adolescence is a time where there is, where it's been called the storm and stress sort of zone of our lives, where there are a lot of changes. And why I would like you all to understand about the brain is because there's been a lot of sort of understanding from the developmental context, the changes that are happening. Now, structure aids the function, and if a structure is not necessarily able to cope with all the functional changes you want from it, then perhaps your intervention might not be very good enough. So when we look at policy, or programs that are set up, if they are not sensitive to how the structure is changing and how the structure can morph, then your policy will probably not have a full effect. So that's sort of my thesis here, and I do need my slides. Without that, I can't explain to you. So we just wait a minute. It was there. I think it may have been a different copy of the slides. Really sorry. It's all right. All right, thank you. So just center stage for adolescence, where a period where through which most of us have gone through it, and all individuals will go through it in order to become a stable, independent adult, assuming fully functional. But the range of changes that happen throughout that, the structural elements are there, the functional elements in the behavior are also there. Next slide, please. All right. So with this, I just want to explain our behavior. There are two, we think of it as two components, the think component and the feel component, where we are talking about emotion, and then the other one we say cognition, the thinking. They're all driven by the structural substrates. You have the brain, and then you have the body. Brain, of course, is part of the body, but slightly there are some differences when it comes to how it plays out. Now, the hormonal changes that are happening, and at the same time, all the circuits are forming in the brain, right? Now, both are synergistic, they influence each other. And we talk about two regions in the brain. One is the core of the brain. That's something that controls the emotions. And then you have the more frontal systems, which develop more slowly, and they become the sort of the controller, the master controller of whatever is happening. Now, typically our behavior, if you can if someone says, why did you do that? Are you able to explain it? Most of the times we are not. Because most of these processes are sub-awareness, at a sub-awareness level. And all these, so a lot of our behavior is automated. And they are perfected through our experience, and we save these automations, and those are sort of played out in given scenarios. Now, if there is something in your environment that is not conducive, and then what you're trying to play out through your experience is not going to fit well, then it's these, the frontal regions, which are responsible to edit what you're going to do, right? So that's the online control that you have. So in behavior, right, so we create mental models through social interactions, and eventually when you're talking about risky behavior, whether it be in life or online, we are talking about making choices, and that is, how do you decide? What do you pick? How do you press that button, or do you say yes? Do you say no? These are the choices. Next slide, please. Right. So any path to effective prevention has to be integrative. We do a lot of those kind of integrations. However, many a times when actually ironing out policies, we leap over some of the more structural aspects which may actually be impediment. Your policy may not be very effective if you've not really accounted for what are the things that would happen anyway. In that automatic process is sometimes overridden. All right. Next slide. Right. So this is a very key thing, which I think we need to tell more and more people, and we need to know, is how our brain develops. Now, if you see that box, this is a 5-year-old's brain, which has a lot of red. That's a 20-year-old brain, which is kind of blue and green. Now, how our circuits are stabilized in our brain through our experience is through a process known as myelination, which is sort of like, so let's talk about creating mature circuits. Now, that maturation actually happens very late. In fact, it's many of my students think they get surprised when they say, an undergraduate class, that your brain is still on its way to perfection. It's not yet perfect. So this kind of a late maturation is a key to a very interesting fact that has been seen, which is that the judgment aspect is last to develop. So the frontal areas, if you notice, all the other areas start to myelinate first, so they mature first, but the front areas mature last. So what does that mean? That means those areas that are driving you through your emotions are all fine. They are perfect. They are working to their capacity. But things that can control it actually develop much later. So next slide, please. What we get is a window of opportunity. It's the essence of our life, right? It's the phase where you can make the most brilliant explorations, come up with, try all sorts of things, go bungee jumping. And then as you get older, you're probably not as amenable to go bungee jumping. That's because your control regions have matured, right? So that sort of that gap is where adolescence sits. And this is where also you see a whole lot of risky behavior. Now, put these people into this world, this digital world that we are talking about, and you have access, increasing access. With all that, then what you have is a perfect storm of all kinds of risky behavior. Next slide, please. This is just another graph to show you. Those are the years on the x-axis. You can see how, so this aspect of sensation seeking, that means thrill seeking, how that kind of a feature peaks around your late teens and starts to come down as you get older. And your impulse control, that means the way to oh, let me go eat ice cream. No, it's too late today, or it's cold, so you'll have a sore throat. You know, those kind of impulse control, that develops gradually and only towards the 20s. This is just another graph showing you. This is from real data. All right, sir. Next slide. All right. So understanding online risky behaviors, these are just some of the theories that are out there. The social learning theory. And then when it comes to decision making, next slide, I'll just go fast. So one of the most popular ways of thinking about it based on these two systems is this dual system cognitive theory, where you have a cognitive control system and a socio-emotional system, and both are sort of in conflict. There's another behavior theory of planned behavior. This is another of the theories with which we analyze actions. This is just sort of some theoretical background. However, this dual system theory is something that I'm trying to sort of showcase today. Next slide, please. Now, from inhibition, or lack of inhibition in those two systems, when we talk about the brain, to what is happening in behavior on the online systems, this is one very important aspect that's been talked about, what is known as the online disinhibition effect. Now, we talk about, this particular idea, there are two kinds of disinhibition. There's both benign as well as toxic disinhibition, right? Now, we talk about phenomena called, do you all know what flaming is? Trolling, flaming. So when somebody just gets you really mad, and then you say abusive things, you hurt people by saying, and people give you some nasty comments too. So now that is toxic disinhibition. And what has been seen to promote that sort of situation is it's completely riding on that socio-emotional system, right? So your cognitive control is a little weak. We are talking about adolescence here, where a lot of things. So when you get into an online space, you have a kind of an anonymity, you have invisibility. Then also there is some kind of an asynchronicity that you experience. There is also, minimization of authority, and the solipsistic interjection, where everything is in your voice, right? You read everybody what they write, you are reading it. It's in your voice. Time up? Okay. Next slide, please. All right. So I've already talked about this. Now, this toxic disinhibition, this is an aspect which kind of is an sort of embodiment of the risky behavior in adolescence. And this is something that comes out of, can we go to the next slide? Sir, next slide, and next. I have a diagram somewhere. No, the diagram's gone. Sorry, never mind. So can you go back, sir? No, the previous slide. All right. So, yeah, I'll just wrap it up with this. So the thing is, now this development differs. Now, we've been talking about different kinds of identities, right? And also online. But then there is the gender angle also is, I think, something that people have presented about today. Now, this development in the space of online activities, the kind of behaviors that you expect are different. They are very similar to our real life behaviors. However, one important aspect is that there are three points that influence the adolescent. So you have the parent, you have the peer, and then you have the school, the teacher, or whichever college, that sort of a structure, right? Now, the institutions are trying to give them more inputs, having them grow, develop. That's one thing, right, in real life. Now, from the parent wants to give more autonomy, independence, so that they develop more concretely. Now, and with peers are always either, you seek your validation from your peers. Now, take it into the online space, then these kind of real life behaviors, now a parent giving more independence, a more, sort of autonomy to the child so it develops well, in fact becomes counterproductive in some way. Then because of the fear comes the extra sort of monitoring that is also counterproductive. So it's a very delicate balance. So what I'm trying to, my final point is that how we have studied adolescent behavior and how these three things influence the adolescent in real life those relationships are not the same when you start to look at online behavior. And with that, I think I'll just wrap up. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is fine. Thank you. How much time I have? 5 minutes? 6 minutes? Yeah, that's enough. Actually, I primarily work in the areas of social psychology, developmental psychology, and media psychology. So today I'll just talk about 2 to 3 points that came out from last 5-6 years of my research in this area of digital vigilantism, digital space, and gender, primarily, and intersectionality, because one of the primary things that I look into my research is how the social location impacts people's experience and the way they face vigilantism in digital space. So these are primary few points that I want to talk about. And one of the things is that there is a lot of eraser. So we started, you can go to the next one actually. So this is a work that we had done during the pandemic. Because when the pandemic hit, and especially after lockdown, there was a surge in online activities, we all know. And actually, all the digital media research also took a surge after that. But what we were interested in was looking at the kind of posts that were made and the kind of stories that were told. So that took us to the representational violence idea, where people suddenly, all of us became very aware about the exodus of migrant workers, and we were telling their stories. So that also takes away their voices of telling their own stories. So that took us to this question of representational violence. And then when we did this extensive research, what we saw was there was an intense xenophobic attitude in them, in people who were talking about it. There was blaming, scapegoating about certain classes of people who were identified as the primary agents of spreading the virus, etc. Few other things that was interesting to us was that how voices gets crafted. Means this today since morning there was a lot of discussion on how stories get crafted in the digital space. That was also something that we saw, this whole brigade of keyboard warriors, this is a common term that is used in discourse nowadays, where they are only writing about stories, which makes us look critically very aware, but rarely we go to these fields and talk to these people. So as I said, these are all taken from my multiple different research, and when I look at other researches where we went to the field and we spoke to workers who are in unorganized sectors, their experiences are very different from what we was watching in Facebook and Instagrams. So, and those stories, the other part was those stories were getting sold, and through our machine heuristics of likes and comments, actually this reel culture also came out of it, and people were making reels out of migrant lives, and nowhere they were telling those stories. Go forward, please. Yeah. Yeah, you can go to the next one. Yeah. This is another thing that in our last 5-6 years, digital vigilantism work that we saw is that the use of digital capital. So there is a lot of discussion about whether the digital reality is very similar to the physical reality, whether it represents similar power dynamics or hierarchies or not, because digital space has an illusion of equity of access, where everybody is equal, although it also has simultaneously the risk of anonymity. And that anonymity actually works as a primary instrument for vigilantism. And this vigilantism is very much what we have seen. It is very much dependent on the social location of the person as well. I'll share a short example, because primarily, as I said in the beginning also, we wanted to focus on the microaggressions, the violations that happen every day, not only the reported violence that we, like sexual harassment, or that gets reported, but the violations, two primary things that mechanisms that work there are de-escalation and normalization. So we just let it go, and then we get used to with it, and then it becomes part of the norm. So I'll give you an example. In one of our work with a participant, she was telling that she had just posted a picture, and she's a person who is about a little short of 5 feet, and a group picture with her friends, and then she posted, and then in this picture she was sitting and most of them were standing. And then another friend of her, who is a male, online in the open platform commented, "I know why you are sitting," and with 2 wink emojis. So she felt bad because she exactly knew what he meant, because this is a person whom she knew in personal life and often teases her about her height or short height. And then she actually retaliated, but she sent a private message. So then it became a string of messages where she is sending private messages and this person is replying to those messages in the open platform. So this is also a form of harassment, and she doesn't want to engage with this person in an open platform, in a verbal spat or let's say online spat, because she fears that this person has a good number of followers who will also band together and troll her for the same reason. Maybe not on that post, but in following posts. And this has happened to her before. Irony is, apparently this is a person whom she calls friends, online and offline. So that's how the digital capital works, which is actually taken from Bourdieu's idea of social capital. Go further, please. Next. Yeah. Another thing is the delegitimization that happens with any marginalized voices. What we have seen that even in online panels, there are of unofficial online panels, I'm saying, which happens in Insta and Facebooks. Okay, yeah. So which happens in Insta and Facebook. Even there, it is mostly token representations. Further analysis even showed us in another research that these representatives from the marginalized cohorts, when I'm saying marginalized, it is across caste, class, gender, sexuality, because in different work we looked into different cohorts. These representatives are also chosen very carefully. The representatives who are the closest to the views of the majorities, or rather non-marginalized groups' views. So who will, in one of the morning session, somebody was saying that I think Professor Many was saying that just the right amount of discussion. This is the same thing if we refer to even Chomsky. Chomsky had this comment that within the periphery we have enough discussion, but we don't go beyond it. The last thing that I want to talk about is, you can go to the last slides. Throughout the day today, there was a lot of discussion, and even the plenary session before this, that how we take away the women's access, the marginalized groups' access. This is something that we have seen in our research also, that we often work on the subject and not the space, which we need to work on. Because as long as we keep on working on the subject, the need remains alive. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rituparna, and a big thank you to the entire panel from Christ University. That were very interesting presentations. Unfortunately, due to paucity of time, we cannot go into a Q&A right now. We'll see how we are placed later. Can I now, for the next panel, which is themed on gender-based violence in digital era, call on the first presenter, Nabanita Das, who's going to be speaking on technology's blind spot, examining the systemic exclusion in direct benefit transfers.
Okay. So throughout the day, we had very thought-provoking and interesting discussions. I'm afraid my presentation is going to be a little facile after that. Also, fair warning, I'm not much of an orator, so bear with me, please. So a little context I'll give you about the subject and why I chose the subject. So I work in the Ministry of Rural Development in the MG Narigis division. So I, all my life I have worked in program implementation. So again, this is my first brush with the academia. So fair warning, bear with me. So a little history I would give about, the context I would give about how direct benefit transfers came into being. So before that, there have been several examples in Mexico and in Brazil, going by the name, schemes by the name of Bolsa Familia Oportunidades. But in our 12th five-year plan, that is when it was seen that there were about 60% people under the Tendulkar line, which was at that time 816 rupees per capita per month in rural areas, and 1,000 rupees in urban areas. So that sort of set the context for inclusive growth. And then Finance Minister, he formed a task force which was headed by Mr. Nandan Nilekani. And this task force was supposed to look at how DBT could be operationalized for LPG schemes. And that's how the whole DBT initiative came into being. A little later, next slide, please. So this is a brief history of direct benefit transfers. So as you can see, it was started in 2013 with DBT rolled out in 43 districts and only 25 schemes. So I have the figure. It was a little over 5,000 crore at the time of 2013, which has come up to 5.7 lakh crore at this point of time in 2023-24. So that is the amount of subsidies, that is the amount of money that are given in subsidies in the form of direct benefit transfers at this point of time. Yes, next slide, please. So as you can see, it's 5.79 lakh crores as of 23-24. So basically, there are three kinds of transfers. I will not go into detail. There are cash transfers, in-kind transfers, and other transfers. So for my paper, which is again an elaborate paper, and I have submitted it. I have delved into the two biggest disbursements, that is Mahatma Gandhi NREGS and PM Kisan, which are both cash transfers. So next slide, please. So this is the operational mechanism of how DBT works. So essentially, the first step is the identification of beneficiaries, eligible beneficiaries, and then digitizing them into databases. Second step is taking those databases and linking them to Aadhaar accounts, or if they do not have accounts, opening new accounts and then linking the Aadhaar information with those accounts. And the last step is seeding those accounts with the phone numbers of the beneficiaries, which is essentially the JAM Trinity, which again I will not go into detail. But the crucial thing is the technology that is crucial here for the smooth functioning of DBT. So as you can see, the DBT funds, these are the two schemes which have the highest amounts of disbursements. So in MG NREGS, you can see that there are about 14 crore active workers, and out of which 52%, half of them happen to be women workers. However, there are still around 3% which have not, whose Aadhaar seeding has not yet been done. So we are worried about that exclusion. And it is inadvertent. So we are worried about how to bring these and there are state datas which I have presented in my paper, in which I have mentioned that there are especially lagging. This is especially lagging in northeastern states, where there is a connectivity problem and where there is also a digital literacy gap problem. Same for PM Kisan as well. And to top the technology gap and to top the digital literacy gap, there is also a gap of inadvertent exclusion. How in our country farmers are primarily men. And that is also one of the ways in which women get excluded from the benefits of these subsidies and schemes. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So this is where I have tried to show, sort of summarize the barriers that we face. Poor connectivity is one, digital illiteracy is also another. Data discrepancies, and this is much more pertinent in case of women, because you see, you all must have an Aadhaar card, and women, especially after marriage, they would have to change their surnames to their husband's surname. And if there is an error, and then there is, to top it up, there is this vernacularization also. For example, Das could be DAS, Das, and in another state, Das could be DASH. So it depends on the person who is handling these databases. It also depends on, people who are engaged in the, data entering. A very simple thing, but an error could absolutely, exclude women from getting the benefit. So, yes, sure. Could you skip? Yeah. So these are some of the ways in which vulnerable groups are disproportionately women are disproportionately excluded from the benefits of the scheme. So But there are some silver linings, which again I would especially like to discuss. There are, next slide please. Next slide. So much criticism has been done of Aadhaar seeding for especially for rural men and women, where there are problems of biometric registration through fingerprint taking, because again there are some trades specifically in which the fingerprints of people get damaged, like people who are engaged in fishing, people who are engaged in agricultural activities. So there is this facial authentication module, which is AI enabled, and that has been introduced by PM Kisan. And I believe that could be a solution to errors which are inadvertent errors which happen due to fingerprint issues.
Can we wrap up, Navneeta?
Yeah, sure. Also, in my paper, I have also mentioned, a broad basing of Aadhaar. So again, today I think Dr. I'm forgetting her name. She mentioned about the case, Puttaswamy case, where the court had mentioned that it is not a violation of privacy. Aadhaar, I mean, giving your details to Aadhaar is not essentially a violation of privacy. So the details could be broad-based in such a manner that the front loading could already be done when the seeding is being done at the back end. Then the Aadhaar details would automatically be populated in the scheme data. So that is another one of the ways. And lastly, one other way which I have mentioned in my paper is a creation of social registry where all kinds of, migration data, let's say a woman or women who are marrying and going off to some other village or area, they could be effectively tracked. So again, like I said, these are some of the ways in which people like us, program implementation people, would absolutely love the academia, suggestions from academia, suggestions from CSOs on how to increase, digital literacy, how to decrease this gap of, awareness about their own rights and all. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really sorry for being the villain in the room here at the moment, but we're really short pressed for time, and we have such fabulous presentations. That was really nice, and it's good to see people from the policy coming into academic presentations. Can I next call on Harita P? She's going to be speaking to us on a feminist divide, the dual struggles of Dalit women in fourth wave and mainstream feminism, a study on Dalit feminism. Harita, strictly 6 to 7 minutes. Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, I am Harita, first year UG student from the Department of Sociology, DG Vaishnav College, University of Madras. Next slide. This paper is based on feminism perspective. We all talk about feminism, which is a general one, but this paper, there are many schools of thoughts of feminism. In that, we focus on the challenges and discrimination between Dalit feminism and mainstream feminism. This paper examines the triple oppression which is faced by Dalit feminists and women. It also analyzes how the fourth wave feminism have an impact on Dalit feminism and women. Next slide. So here comes the methodology. The research type is empirical, and the research design we have used is quantitative and qualitative research design. The sampling technique is purposive and quota sampling. The data collected was primary data and secondary data. The tool used to collect data is narrative review, interview method, and sentiment analysis. The total number of respondents is 100. The objectives of the study is first to analyze the distinction between Dalit feminism and mainstream feminism. Second, to examine the challenges and discrimination faced by Dalit feminists and Dalit women. Third, to evaluate the impact of digital activism on the empowerment of Dalit women. Fourth, to examine whether Dalit feminism is truly inclusive. Next slide. So here is the discussion. The first discussion is about the other side of feminism, Dalit women's battle. The first pie chart represents the level of struggles faced by Dalit and normal feminism. So the 66.7% of the respondents says that there is a difference between the struggles faced by Dalit and mainstream feminism, where the 33.3% of the respondents say that there is no difference between the struggles faced by Dalit and mainstream feminism. Actually, the 33.3% of the respondents, they are not aware of the term Dalit, where the 66.7% of the respondents, they are aware about the Dalit and Dalit community, but they are unaware about the Dalit feminism. The next slide. Dalit women are unaware of the existence of digital feminism, while the 11.8% of the respondents were unsure whether Dalit women could effectively use digital platforms. So if we take for example, if we take the case of Tenmoli Soundararajan, she is a digital activist artist, the founder of Equality Labs, a Dalit civil rights organization focused on digital activism. She uses social media to educate people about caste discrimination, digital security for Dalits, and the intersection of caste and technology. Next slide. The third discussion is about digital feminism is inclusive or exclusive. 54.9% of the respondents say that it is inclusive, while the 45.1% of the respondents say that it is not entirely inclusive. They point out that mainstream digital feminism in India is often led by upper caste feminists, while digital feminism is not always fully inclusive. True inclusivity is possible when intersectional voices lead the conversation. Next slide. So here comes the conclusion. Although digital platforms empower Dalit women to represent themselves without relying on mainstream feminism, sometimes they suppress their voices. They remain barriers to access, such as digital literacy and economic constraints. True inclusivity requires intersectional representation, ensuring that these voices are not only heard, but also supported through concrete actions, such as policy advocacy, grassroots mobilization, and intersectional reforms. While digital spaces offer visibility, the next step is to transform online activism into meaningful real-world change, ensuring that feminism becomes a force that addresses the unique challenges of all women, regardless of caste, class, or background. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harita. Sorry. It's really heartening to see a first-year student make this presentation. Next time, I'm sure if you have more time, you can go into more deeper analysis of your data, right? Thank you. May I now call on Arudra R. and Priyanka Devi MS? Oh, they are not here? Okay. Riti Singh? Do we have Riti here? We don't have Riti? Okay. Do we have Dr. Lakshmi Devi? Yeah. Dr. Lakshmi Devi is going to speak on gendered patterns in online trolling and cyberbullying. Please stick to 7 to 8 minutes.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮೀ ದೇವಿ, ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಫಾರ್ ವಿಮೆನ್ ಸ್ಟಡೀಸ್, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಿಟಿ, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು. ಮೈ ಟಾಪಿಕ್ ಈಸ್ ಆಸ್ ಅ ಜೆಂಡರ್ ಪ್ಯಾಟರ್ನ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ ಟ್ರೋಲಿಂಗ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಸೈಬರ್ ಬುಲ್ಲಿಂಗ್. My abstract is the rise of digital communication has led to increased cyber harassment, particularly against women. This study explored the social, cultural, and structural factors perpetrating as a digital misconduct, as analyzing the role of anonymity as a social media algorithms and digital echo chambers, as using a mixed methods approach. The research identified the psychological, social, and professional repercussions of cyber harassment. The study also examines policy effectiveness and suggests interventions for safe online spaces. And also, as a background of the study, cyber harassment is a growing issue worldwide. Reports indicated the cyberbullying among young adults has increased, with women being appropriately targeted. And studies show that social media platforms fail to remove a large percentage of abuse content, leading to severe psychological and social consequences. As a research gap, limited focus on gendered online harassment and insufficient regional and state platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, and X, a psychological impact, anxiety, depression, social withdrawals, and only 30% reported incidents, most found legal responses ineffectiveness. As a discussion and key insights is, gendered online harassments follows offline discrimination patterns. Platforms fail to take advocates' action against abuse content. Legal enforcement remains weak despite increasing cases of digital abuse. Need for stronger legal frameworks and mental health supports. As a recommendations and conclusions, we can, as a strength, cyber laws and enforcement, improve content moderation on digital platforms, raise awareness through digital safety campaigns, provide mental health and support for victims. As a conclusions, gendered online harassment is a growing concern requiring multi-level interventions. A collaborative approach between government, tech companies, and societal is essential to ensure safer digital spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi. That was really nice and short. I'm sure that if we have, yes, I know. We're really pushing you, everybody here, because we're very short of time in the last session, but a very interesting topic, and I'm sure with more time, you can go analyze your data a lot more, right? A very, very pertinent topic. Yes. No, you've done full justice to that. Do we have Rohind S? Yeah. Rohind is going to present on the digital divide, unspoken gender challenges and algorithmic biases to beyond inclusion, a study on persons with disabilities.
Naturally hot and artificially warm. I begin my presentation. I am Rohin Das, a second year UG student with the background of sociology, doing my sociology in D.G. Vishnu College, Chennai, and University of Madras. My presentation is all about the digital divide, the unspoken gender challenges and algorithmic bias and inclusion. This is my study overview. If you see that picture itself, you'll be getting to know that my presentation is all about the physically challenged people, but it's not. I specifically focus the group called intellectual disability and the visual impaired category of PWDs, where gender-based violence and the algorithmic bias faced by them was my primary focus about the study. Next slide. These are my few literature review which I gone through. Next. This is the aims of the study. The first aim is to identify their discrimination in online gaming, and the second one is to identify their inclusive and disability friendly campuses like in schools and colleges. The third is all about the role of ATS in disqualifying the disability people of ID and VI. Next slide. This is my research design and approach. This research is all about scoping review, where I employed primary and secondary data collection. Primary data focuses on purposive sampling, followed by interview and sentiment analysis. And then the secondary data focuses on qualitative. The total respondents I have surveyed was 240, where I categorized them as in 3 categories, like variable 1, variable 2, and variable 3. And the sample area was Chennai and Kanchipuram. Next slide. Since my paper is all about scoping review, I have taken some research focus area. With that, I found some scoping review findings with respect to the primary data which I collected. Next slide. This is my first discussion titled Breaking the Inclusion Barrier Between the Friendly and Inclusive Campus. It's due to time constraint, I leave that pie chart, explanation of that pie chart. But alone in colleges and schools, the infrastructure development will be there. If you take the peoples like ID, intellectual disability, and the visually impaired people, they don't have much infrastructure even in universities and so on. So if you take the ID peoples, the university I surveyed was 3 and the colleges I surveyed was 5, totally 7. Among them, I found that if, they are not giving a syllabus construction or the project construction or exam construction for the people with ID. If you take the people with visually impaired, they don't have a proper scribe to help them or guide them during their exams and so on. So those universities are getting students just for OD. if the professor is coming, is saying that we need some scribe, we will be providing OD for 2 days. For that OD, they are going and helping those visually impaired candidates during that exams. But apart from that, there are few campuses which really inclusive for them. Among the 2 universities, I found a department called Department of Physically Challenged. They have some one department where in that department they have pakka infrastructure for those with the intellectual disability and visually impaired. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide is all about AI hiring turns disability into disqualification. I think in morning plenary session also, the speaker had mentioned that if you take the history or the employment history of a company, let's say I am running a company for 10 years, but I don't hire the persons with the disability. In this case, if a person with a disability is normal people other than the intellectual disability and visually impaired. If you take the intellectual disability and the VI, that is visually impaired people, they don't have workplace inclusion or something else like that. These are the 2 examples which I found from my secondary sources. Next slide, please. The third is all about cinema and games. Here, if you take cinema, the cinema is projecting them in order to gain the emotional support from the audience to develop their scenes in that particular movie. If you take Tamil movies, we have few directors who project physically challenged peoples as a tool to get the audience emotion in that particular scene. Other than the directors like this, we have few directors which where they use comedy characters for this PWDs. Where in that comedy characters, they will project these PWD characters and their PWD representation, and they discriminate directly about these peoples. If you take the gaming industry, in gaming industry, like in India, we don't have much games which are really helping the peoples like ID and VI to play. But if you take the games, there are few games really helping the peoples to play. Here, my research raises a question. If a mainstream gaming allows non-disabled characters to perform extraordinary feats, why can't the PWD? In gaming, it's just an imagination of a character where the character can fly in the air without any tool or something else. But they are not getting aware to project the PWD. Yeah, ma'am. They are not ready to project the PWD like the PWD people who is running with a wheelchair. It's an imagination character where we are projecting that. So here I need to, as a researcher, I feel like artificial intelligence is a platform where we are artificially tuning our stereotypes and projecting in the online platforms like an official note. If you take AI in all the category, for example, if you type, give me few, if you ask them a teacher profession, it will be giving a female teacher only. It will not give a male teacher. So here itself, we can clearly understand that someone who is sitting and creating that AI design or ChatGPT, whatever the stereotypes he is having in his mind, it's getting replicated or replaced here officially. We don't have any guts to raise question in the policy or the whatever the norms we are having. We should be checking and implementing that in a ground reality manner. We need to understand the ground reality and then we need to implement. If university itself not providing an infrastructure for ID and VI, then how come the people in a normal state or people who are working in a school will provide a infrastructure for them? If you take the last one point I will be saying and concluding my presentation, ma'am. In Tamil Nadu, we have a teacher training course. In that Unit 6 speaks about the children and their victimization. But in that also, they don't even teach about the persons with the disability children who are facing discriminations and violence, which can be said as a doubly marginalized than the normal children. If you take a normal children, he will be facing one particular discrimination or violence. If you take this people of PWD, already they are in a marginalized state. Their discrimination also goes beyond that marginalized state. So we need to concentrate them, and we need to give some policy recommendations as a researcher. And last but not least, as a researcher, we need to understand the ground reality. Rather than going with a policy of PWD or so and so, we need to understand the ground reality and work on our research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rohin. I remember always that it's when you bring the ground reality through your research is when it translates into policy. And policymakers look forward to seeing the research of people working at the ground reality from you. So thank you, yeah.
I'm working in RDPR, so we have started Arivu Kendra, which is a library. Before it was a library, and now we call it Arivu Kendra. There we are implementing the same visually impaired people's everything. Like the children are able to read, the children are able to play.
Fantastic.
And the Braille has been implemented. So why? Because I work in an ANSSIRD, State Institute of Rural Development. Yeah. So there what we have done is that we have a visually impaired person who is actually contributing, and entire institution is visually impaired and disabled friendly. So that has been implemented in Karnataka state government at the Gram Panchayati level.
Brilliant.
I'm speaking about Gram Panchayati, which means a rural level. So every Gram Panchayati, now it's a pilot program. It is already started. It's inaugurated by the very own the Ministry of Rural Development, and it's been majorly focus of our ACS ma'am, Uma Mahadevan. Okay. So you can please go into that and read it, so you'll get more enlightened view on that.
Thank you so much for the
intervention.
We finally come to the last presentation, and what I find most intriguing is that it's actually what we should have started with, because we need to look at the role of social media in creating gender-based violence. To present on this, we have Shatabdi Mandal, Shazia Khan, and Sonia Shah. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I am Shazia Khan.
Speak closer to the mic. Yeah. Yep, just put the mic closer. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I am Shazia Khan from 4th sem of Ravindra Sikha Sammilani Law College under Calcutta University.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sonia Shah from Ravindra Shiksha Sammilani Law College under Calcutta University, and our presentation topic is role of social media in creating gender-based violence. That means how social media is influencing in the development of gender-based violence. So we live in a technological world surrounded with various of technology and included social media, and social media has become the part of our daily life. Next slide, please. Through social media, we get to know each other. We connected with the friends, family, make new friends, get socialized with people, and get updated whatever happening surrounded the world. But along with its positive side, there's also a negative side of the social media, that is gender-based violence. Now, the gender-based violence is basically a violence which is indirected to a person based on their gender, sex, stereotype, and societal roles, etc.
Now, the question will arise how the social media is creating gender-based violence, or what's the role of social media in creating gender-based violence. As we already talked about what is social media and gender-based violence, and how social media became day-to-day part of our life. Social media is very helpful to us, but it also have a negative side in creating gender-based violence. In various social media platforms, the users get bullied by the other people through negative and offensive comments, messages. It's spreading lies about that person, uploading embarrassing photos and videos on social media. Now we see at the present time the categories of people affected by the gender-based violence. As we know, mostly the women or girls are affected, and also LGBTQ community, men and boys, children and teenagers, elderly individuals, public figures and activists.
Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. No, before that. Before that, yeah. Now, the types of gender-based violence or the categories of gender-based violence. The first one is the sextortion. This is basically a form of blackmailing where one individual is threatened to other individual to share some sexual pictures in a personal picture, videos, and picture, videos, images without their consent. Second one, image-based abuse, is a form of gender-based violence where private images or videos are shared without their consent. Then doxing, it's basically an online attack where personal information was get leaked by one person without the consent. Personal information included phone number, bank details, house address. This basically was due because of revenge purpose to blackmail someone. Then cyberbullying is the bullying by the use of technology to harass, to threaten, or embarrass others through social media. And last, online gender and sexual harassment include non-consensual of sharing intimate images, sexual trait, blackmailing, sexualized, and bullying. After that, impact of social media, which was faced by the victim due to the gender-based violence. First of all, is the mental emotional distress. Due to the gender-based violence, sometimes the victim was starting having anxiety, losing self-confidence, depression, PTSD. Then social isolation and self-censorship. Sometimes due to the gender-based violence, the victims start losing interest in getting socialized. They start living alone, avoid social gathering in order to escape abuse. Then reputational damage. Sometimes the gender-based violence also lead to the reputational damage, harm in their career opportunities. Then psychological safety risk. Online abuse can also escalate to real world stalking or violence, making victims feel unsafe in their day-to-day life. Legal justice and barrier. Many victims struggle to get justice due to the weak online protection law and slow response from platform, victim blaming, and attitude.
Slide number 8.
Next slide. Yeah.
Now we discuss key features of social media that enable gender-based violence. First is anonymity. Allows offender to harass or threaten others without revealing their identity, making them feel untouchable. Second one is lack of regulation. Many platforms fails to act on reports, allowing abuse to continue without consequences. Third one is wide reach. Harmful content spreads quickly, leading to public shaming and long-term reputational damage. Algorithmic amplification. Social media boosts harmful content because controversial posts gets more engagement. Next one is recommendation to prevent gender-based violence on social media. Firstly, straightening social media policies to make a strict and enforceable policy for the users. Second one is educating users on online safety. To educate users on online safety, that means give basic knowledge regarding the online safety. Third one is legal reforms for addressing online gender-based violence, straightening laws against cyber stalking, doxing, and image-based abuse. Encouraging digital bystanders to take action. Educate users on how to challenge abusive behavior and support victims.
Next slide. Last, our conclusion. So in conclusion, we should at least give basic knowledge and educational to people of what is gender-based violence, at least make strict and enforceable law by the various social media platform companies and government, and the social media platform must enforce anti-gender-based violence. That's all. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. With that, we come to an end to this fantastic, technical session. We've heard such brilliant papers. What's most heartening is that not just have we throughout the day seen so many good feminist scholars speak, but also young scholars, budding scholars who are UG students, PG students, come and talk about this issue. The fact is today that in the world of gender studies, we cannot ignore the world which is the online world. While it may have brought us all together, the harm that lies just underneath that skin is really, really scary. Geeta Chadha ma'am spoke about adolescence. I teach an OE on gender and politics to CSIT students, and I really believe it should be made compulsory viewing. If any one of you have not yet seen the 4 episodes of the series called Adolescence on Netflix, I really think you all should. So please carry on with your beautiful inquiries here, and I wish you all the very best in your endeavors. We don't have the time. Sure. Absolutely not. Absolutely. That's what's happening.
Absolutely. Brilliant. It's absolutely. Yeah. I'm from Kolkata too, so lovely. Yeah. So for teachers, it's so heartening to see young students do this research. So I wish you all the very best. Don't give up the spark and the desire to carry on doing your research. And I must commend all of you that you all have chosen brilliant areas to do your work. And well done.
And I think so there's high tea waiting outside. We can all take our questions and comments across a cup of tea, right? We can do some chai pe charcha there. So I thank Bangalore University for having me over. It's been really lovely. Thank you.